In the spaces between what history remembers and what time has forgotten, there exist threads of mystery that weave through the very fabric of human existence. Ancient stones whisper secrets to empty fields. Civilizations vanish like morning mist, leaving behind only questions carved in weathered rock. Libraries burn, taking with the knowledge that could reshape understanding of who we were, who we are, who we might become. These are not merely puzzles to be solved, but doorways into the profound unknowing that defines the human condition. Each mystery carries within it the weight of countless lives, the echo of voices calling across millennia, the shadow of truths that slip just beyond the reach of comprehension. Tonight, the boundaries between the known and unknowable dissolve, revealing pathways into history's deepest enigmas, those sacred spaces where wonder dwells eternal, where sleep and revelation dance together in the timeless dark. In the rolling hills of southeastern Turkey, where the Euphrates cradles ancient dreams, stands a testament to humanity's forgotten grandeur. Göbekli Tepe rises from the earth like a prayer made stone, its massive pillars bearing witness to a civilization that should not exist according to everything historians thought they knew about the dawn of human culture. The stones themselves tell an impossible story. Carved with exquisite precision 11,000 years ago, these T-shaped monoliths tower above the landscape, each weighing up to 16 tons, arranged in perfect circles that speak of astronomical knowledge and mathematical understanding. Yet this was supposedly an age of hunter-gatherers, nomadic tribes who had not yet learned to plant seeds or tame wild beasts. The conventional timeline of human development crumbles in the face of these ancient monuments. Klaus Schmidt, the German archaeologist who first recognized the site's true significance, found himself confronting a paradox that would reshape archaeological thinking. Here, before Stonehenge, before the pyramids, before the first cities rose along the Mesopotamian rivers, unknown peoples had gathered to create humanity's first temple complex. The implications ripple through time like stones cast into still water. The pillars themselves are works of art that transcend their massive scale. Carved reliefs dance across their surfaces, foxes with human-like expressions, serpents coiling through geometric patterns, birds of prey with wings spread wide as if frozen in eternal flight. Some scholars believe these images encode astronomical observations mapping constellations across the stone surfaces. Others see shamanic visions, the dreams of spiritual leaders carved into eternal permanence. What drives a hunter-gatherer society to organize such monumental construction? The logistics alone stagger the imagination. Quarrying the massive stones, transporting them across miles of rough terrain, raising them into perfect alignment, all accomplished without wheels, without metal tools, without domesticated animals. The effort would have required hundreds of workers laboring for decades, supported by elaborate systems of food distribution and social organization. Perhaps most mysterious of all is the deliberate burial of the entire complex. Around 8,000 years ago, the builders carefully covered their masterpiece with tons of earth, creating the artificial hill that concealed it for millennia. This was not destruction, but preservation, as if the creators knew their work was destined for a future generation to discover. Some archaeologists propose that Göbekli Tepe represents humanity's first attempt at creating sacred space, a central gathering point where nomadic tribes could come together for rituals that bound them into larger social units. The site might have served as a kind of spiritual technology, using monumental architecture to facilitate the cognitive revolution that would eventually lead to agriculture, cities, and civilization itself. Others suggest more esoteric possibilities. The precise astronomical alignments hint at sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics. The animal carvings might encode mythological narratives or shamanic journeys through altered states of consciousness. Some researchers have noted similarities between the site's imagery and ancient accounts of the Watchers, The enigmatic beings mentioned in apocryphal texts who supposedly taught forbiddance knowledge to early humanity. The carbon dating presents its own mysteries. The oldest structures at Dogon and Tepe are also the most sophisticated, as if the builders possessed advanced knowledge from the very beginning, rather than developing their skills over time. This reversal of expected technological progression suggests either a lost tradition of monumental construction or contact with an unknown source of knowledge. Recent discoveries at similar sites across the region, Karahan Tepe, Navali Kori, Hamzin Tepe, indicate that Göbekli Tepe was not an isolated phenomenon, but part of a widespread culture that flourished during the Neolithic transition. This civilization appears to have vanished as suddenly as it emerged, leaving behind only these stone witnesses to their existence. The site continues to yield secrets. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed additional structures still buried beneath the earth, suggesting that less than 10% of the complex has been excavated. Each new discovery deepens the mystery rather than resolving it, as if Göbekli Tepe guards its secrets as jealously today as it did during its millennia of concealment. Standing among these ancient stones at sunset, when the shadows stretch long across the Anatolian plateau, one senses the weight of unknowing that presses down like gathering dusk. These monuments speak not just of human achievement, but of human longing, the desire to create something permanent, something meaningful, something that would survive the countless turnings of seasons and generations. The silence of Göbekli Tepe is not empty but full, pregnant with questions that may never find answers. Who were these ancient architects? What drove them to such extraordinary effort? What knowledge did they possess that has been lost to time? The stones remain mute, their secrets locked in mineral permanence, waiting perhaps for a wisdom humanity has yet to rediscover. Yet stone circles were not the only monuments to vanish beneath Earth's patient embrace. South of Cairo, where the Nile bends toward the western desert, an ancient Memphis once commanded the river's bounty. There once stood a structure so magnificent that it reduced the Great Pyramid to a mere footnote in architectural history. Herodotus, the father of history himself, stood before this wonder in the 5th century before Christ and declared it more marvelous than all the temples of Greece combined. Yet today, this monument has vanished so completely that even its location remains disputed. The Greeks called it the Labyrinth, though its Egyptian name, Labyrinth, meant temple at the mouth of the lake. According to ancient accounts, this was no mere building but an entire city under one roof, containing 3,000 rooms arranged across 2 levels, half beneath the earth, half reaching toward the sky. 12 courts open to the heavens, each dedicated to one of the nomes of Egypt, connected by corridors so complex that no visitor could navigate them without a guide. Herodotus walked these halls with wonder and mounting bewilderment. He described chambers carved from single blocks of stone, ceilings that soared like cathedral vaults, walls covered with reliefs that told the history of Egypt from the time of the gods to his own era. The underground levels, he was told, contained the tombs of the sacred crocodiles and the kings who built the structure, but he was forbidden to descend into those depths where secrets too sacred for foreign eyes lay hidden in perpetual darkness. The historian Strabo, writing 3 centuries later, provided additional details that only deepen the mystery. He spoke of a vast complex near Lake Maris, constructed with such precision that each stone fit perfectly against its neighbors without mortar or binding agent. The roof, he claimed, was carved from single massive stones, each covering an entire room. The mathematical precision required for such construction challenges understanding even today. Pliny the Elder, drawing from earlier sources, described chambers connected by winding passages deliberately designed to confuse intruders. He wrote of rooms that served as repositories for Egypt's sacred books, Libraries containing the wisdom of millennia, carefully preserved against the erosions of time and political upheaval. Other chambers housed astronomical instruments and maps of the heavens, while still others contained the mummified remains of sacred animals and the priests who served them. But perhaps most intriguing are the accounts of the labyrinth's purpose. Some ancient sources suggest it served as a vast administrative center, a bureaucratic heart, where the complex governance of Egypt was coordinated. Others describe it as a temple complex where initiates underwent elaborate spiritual trials, navigating the maze-like structure as a metaphor for the soul's journey through death and rebirth. The Roman geographer Pomponius Mela wrote that the labyrinth contained replicas of all the temples of Egypt, allowing priests to perform ceremonies for every god in the pantheon without traveling to distant shrines. This would have made it a kind of spiritual metropolis, concentrating the religious power of an entire civilization within a single architectural marvel. Archaeological attempts to locate the labyrinth have met with frustrating ambiguity. Flinders Petrie, the pioneering Egyptologist, claimed to have found its remains near the pyramid of Amenhotep III at Hawara in the late 19th century. However, his discoveries consisted mainly of limestone chips and foundation stones, a disappointing shadow of the magnificent structure described by ancient historians. More recent expeditions, using ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery, have detected vast underground anomalies in the region, suggesting the presence of large buried structures. These investigations hint at chambers and corridors that match ancient descriptions, but decades of excavation have failed to uncover the treasure trove of rooms and artifacts that should exist if the historical accounts are accurate. Some researchers propose that the labyrinth was deliberately destroyed and its stones quarried for other projects during the Roman period. The Romans had little respect for Egyptian monuments, viewing them primarily as sources of building material for their own constructions. Entire temples disappeared during this era, their stones incorporated into ramal, fortifications, and public buildings. Others suggest that the structure may have been built on unstable ground and gradually collapsed into underground chambers as the earth shifted over millennia. The region around Lake Moeris has experienced significant geological changes since ancient times, with water levels fluctuating and soil composition altering in ways that could have swallowed even massive stone structures. A more esoteric theory proposes that the labyrinth still exists but remains hidden by design. Ancient Egyptian texts speak of architectural magic, buildings that could be concealed from unworthy eyes through spiritual techniques. According to this interpretation, the labyrinth waits beneath the sands, protected by the same mysterious forces that once guided initiates through its sacred passages. The disappearance of such a monumental structure raises profound questions about the reliability of historical memory and the fragility of human achievement. If a building comparable to a small city can vanish without trace, what other wonders have been lost to time's relentless appetite? The silence where the labyrinth once stood echoes with the weight of unknowing, a void in history that no amount of archaeological investigation has been able to fill. Where stone monuments fade, sometimes entire civilizations follow. In the vast blue expanse of the Pacific, where island chains scatter like jewels across oceanic immensity, there supposedly once existed a continent that dwarfed all current landmasses in both size and cultural sophistication. The lost civilization of Mu, according to its most passionate advocate, encompassed nearly the entire Pacific basin, supporting a population of 64 million souls who had mastered sciences and spiritual practices that would seem miraculous. Even today, James Churchward, a British-American explorer and mystic, spent the early decades of the 20th century piecing together what he claimed was evidence for this vanished realm. Working from ancient tablets he said were shown to him by a Hindu priest in India, Churchward described a continent that predated Atlantis by tens of thousands of years, a motherland of humanity where civilization first flowered before spreading to other parts of the globe. According to Churchward's reconstructions, Mu was a tropical paradise where advanced beings lived in harmony with natural forces. These ancient Lemurians, as they were sometimes called, possessed knowledge of aviation, energy manipulation, and consciousness expansion that enabled them to create a golden age lasting for millennia. Their cities were marvels of organic architecture, built in accordance with cosmic principles that channeled natural energies for both practical and spiritual purposes. The civilization of Mu supposedly reached its zenith around 12,000 years ago, when catastrophic volcanic eruptions and earthquakes caused the entire continent to sink beneath the Pacific waves in a single day and night. The few survivors fled to various islands and distant shores, carrying fragments of their ancient wisdom to become the founders of other civilizations. Thus, according to this theory, the mysterious megalithic cultures found throughout the Pacific region represent not independent developments, but echoes of Mu's lost glory. Skeptical scholars have long dismissed Churchward's claims as fantasy, pointing out that his supposed ancient sources cannot be verified and that Pacific geology shows no evidence for a continent-sized landmass that disappeared in recent geological time. The ocean floor in the region consists of ancient basalt formed by underwater volcanic activity, not the granite bedrock that would indicate former dry land. However, more nuanced investigations have revealed tantalizing possibilities that conventional archaeology struggles to address. The Pacific Islands do indeed harbor numerous mysteries that challenge standard models of prehistoric human migration and cultural development. How did ancient Polynesian navigators traverse thousands of miles of open ocean with such precision that they could locate tiny islands scattered across an area larger than all the world's continents combined? Recent genetic studies have revealed unexpected complexity in Pacific populations, suggesting multiple waves of migration from different source regions over extended periods. Some lineages appear to trace back to populations that no longer exist, in their pure form, as if entire peoples vanished from the historical record. Archaeological evidence from various Pacific islands indicates sophisticated maritime cultures that achieved remarkable feats of engineering and navigation thousands of years before European contact. The mystery deepens when examining the massive stone platforms and megalithic structures found throughout Polynesia and Micronesia. Nammadol in Micronesia, often called the Venice of the Pacific, consists of artificial islands constructed from massive basalt prisms arranged with engineering precision that challenges explanation. The builders somehow transported stones weighing up to 50 tons across water and assembled them into complex architectural forms without apparent access to advanced machinery. Easter Island's Moai statues represent another enigma that hints at lost capabilities. Recent excavations have revealed that these iconic heads are actually full-body figures buried up to their necks, some standing over 30 feet tall. The precision of their carving and the logistics of their transportation across the island suggest organizational abilities and technical knowledge that seem disproportionate to the island's small population and limited resources. Throughout the Pacific, oral traditions preserve memories of lands that sank beneath the waves and golden ages that ended in catastrophe. Hawaiian legends speak of the continent of Mu, while Aboriginal Australian stories describe a time when the seas were lower, and vast territories now underwater were home to sophisticated peoples. These traditions, while not constituting historical proof, suggest that collective memory may preserve echoes of actual geological events. Modern oceanographic research has revealed dramatic changes in Pacific sea levels during the last ice age, when global water was locked in continental glaciers. Vast areas now underwater were dry land as recently as 10,000 years ago, potentially supporting large populations whose archaeological remains now lie beneath hundreds of feet of seawater. As the ice melted and seas rose, entire coastal civilizations would have been inundated, their cities and monuments swallowed by the advancing waves. The Bimini Road Formation in the Caribbean, while technically outside the Pacific, exemplifies the kind of underwater structures that fuel speculation about sunken civilizations. These geometric stone formations, lying beneath 20 feet of water, appear too regular to be natural, yet show no clear signs of human construction. Similar anomalies have been reported from Pacific waters, though systematic investigation remains. Limited by the vast distances and depths involved, perhaps the truth about Mu lies somewhere between Churchward's romantic fantasies and conventional archaeology's rigid dismissals. The Pacific may indeed conceal evidence of sophisticated prehistoric cultures that achieved remarkable technological and spiritual developments before being overwhelmed by natural catastrophes. The scattered islands that remain could be mountain peaks of a once integrated cultural region, preserving fragments of knowledge and tradition that hint at grander possibilities lost beneath the waves. Across vast waters, other islands guard their secrets behind walls of time. In the granite hills of southeastern Africa, where ancient copies rise like sleeping giants from the savannah, stand the weathered walls of a city that once commanded trade routes stretching from the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic shores. Great Zimbabwe, built between the 11th and 5th centuries, represents the pinnacle of indigenous African architecture and political organization. Yet its sudden abandonment around 1450 CE remains one of archaeology's most perplexing mysteries. The name Zimbabwe itself, derived from Jimbadzimabu, means houses of stone in the Shona language, and the ruins justify this designation with their massive granite walls that snake across the landscape like ancient serpents. The great enclosure, an elliptical structure with walls 36 feet high and over 800 feet in circumference, demonstrates engineering sophistication that rivals medieval European fortifications. Most remarkably, these walls were constructed entirely without mortar, using a technique of precisely fitted stones that has allowed them to survive 5 centuries of abandonment. Archaeological evidence reveals that Great Zimbabwe was far more than a simple settlement. It served as the capital of a vast trading empire that controlled the flow of gold, ivory, and copper from the African interior to Swahili ports along the coast. Chinese porcelain, Persian glassware, and Indian textiles found within the ruins testify to commercial networks that span the Indian Ocean, connecting this African heartland to the markets of Asia centuries before European explorers reached the continent. The city's population at its peak may have reached 20,000 inhabitants, making it one of the largest settlements in medieval Africa. The hill complex, perched atop a granite outcrop, likely served as a royal residence and spiritual center. Here, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of sophisticated astronomical observations, with stone alignments that track the movements of celestial bodies with remarkable precision. The famous soapstone bird sculptures found at the site may represent totemic spirits or astronomical markers, their stylized forms combining naturalistic observation with symbolic meaning. The wealth of Great Zimbabwe rested primarily on gold, mining, and trade. The surrounding region contained some of Africa's richest gold deposits, and evidence suggests that mining operations were conducted on an industrial scale. Archaeologists have identified over 4,000 mine shafts in the vicinity, many showing signs of ancient workings that extracted gold ore using sophisticated techniques of fire setting and hydraulic processing. Yet despite this prosperity and apparent stability, Great Zimbabwe was suddenly abandoned sometime in the mid-15th century. The city was not destroyed by conquest or natural disaster. Instead, its inhabitants simply departed, leaving behind a ghost metropolis that would stand empty for centuries. This mass exodus presents historians with a puzzle that has generated numerous theories but no definitive answers. Climate change represents one of the most compelling explanations for the abandonment. Paleoclimatic data suggest that the late 15th century witnessed a period of severe drought across southeastern Africa, part of a global cooling period known as the Little Ice Age. The sophisticated agricultural systems that supported great Zimbabwe's large population would have been vulnerable to prolonged dry conditions, potentially forcing inhabitants to seek more favorable territories. Political factors may have contributed to the city's decline. By the 15th century, the Zimbabwe state faced increasing competition from rival powers, particularly the emerging kingdom of Mutapa to the north. The concentration of wealth and population at Great Zimbabwe may have become a liability as political decentralization offered more flexible responses to changing conditions. Some scholars propose that the abandonment reflects a deliberate spiritual decision. Traditional Shona religion emphasizes the connection between ancestors and the land, and oral traditions suggest that the rulers of Great Zimbabwe may have relocated their capital to maintain harmony with ancestral spirits. The careful preservation of the site's sacred areas and the absence of destruction support this interpretation. Economic factors cannot be ignored. The Indian Ocean trading networks that enriched Great Zimbabwe were subject to disruption by changing political conditions. In the Swahili city-states and the emerging Portuguese presence along the coast, as trade routes shifted and traditional partners became less reliable, the economic foundation of Zimbabwe's power may have eroded, making the capital unsustainable. Recent archaeological work has revealed subtle signs of environmental stress in the city's final years. Soil exhaustion around Great Zimbabwe suggests that intensive agriculture had depleted the land's fertility, while evidence of deforestation indicates that fuel wood had become increasingly scarce. These ecological pressures may have combined with political and climatic factors to make abandonment the most viable option. The colonial period brought additional mysteries and distortions to the site's interpretation. European explorers and settlers, unwilling to credit indigenous Africans with such sophisticated achievements, invented fantastical theories attributing Great Zimbabwe to Phoenicians, Arabs, or biblical figures. These racist interpretations persisted well into the 20th century, obscuring serious archaeological investigation and perpetuating harmful stereotypes about African capabilities. Modern research has definitively established Great Zimbabwe as an indigenous African achievement, but important questions remain unanswered. The precise mechanisms of the city's political organization, the full extent of its trading networks, and a complete sequence of events leading to its abandonment continue to challenge historians and archaeologists. Standing within the great enclosure today, surrounded by walls that have weathered 5 centuries of solitude, one feels the weight of interrupted dreams. These stones speak of ambition and achievement, of a civilization that mastered its environment and reached toward distant horizons, yet ultimately chose or was forced to release its grip on permanence. Stone cities crumble, but some mysteries travel in vessels of papyrus and ink. Beneath the ancient foundations of Moscow's Kremlin, in chambers that have never felt the touch of sunlight, there may rest one of history's greatest treasure troves of lost knowledge. The legendary Liberia of Tsar Ivan IV, known to history as Ivan the Terrible, supposedly contains manuscripts and books that vanished from the world when Constantinople fell to Ottoman forces in 1453. If the library exists as described in fragmentary historical accounts, its discovery would revolutionize understanding of classical antiquity and medieval scholarship. The story begins in the early 16th century, when Ivan's grandmother, Sophia Palaiologina, arrived in Moscow as the bride of Grand Prince Ivan. 3. As a niece of the last Byzantine emperor, Sophia brought with her not only imperial bloodlines, but also, according to persistent legends, wagon loads of books and manuscripts rescued from Constantinople's burning libraries. These works supposedly included classical texts by authors whose writings have been lost to history, scientific treatises that predated European discoveries by centuries, and religious manuscripts containing variant gospel traditions that never entered the Orthodox canon. Ivan IV, ascending to the throne in 1547, inherited not only political power but also, if the legends prove true, guardianship over this accumulated wisdom. Contemporary accounts describe the young Tsar as intensely intellectual, fluent in multiple languages, and possessed of theological knowledge that impressed even learned clergy. His surviving letters demonstrate sophisticated rhetorical skills and wide reading that would have required access to an extensive library far beyond what was commonly available in 16th century Russia. The German diplomat Johann Taube, who served in Ivan's court during the 1560s, left tantalizing references to a secret library containing countless treasures of wisdom hidden beneath the royal palace. According to Taube's account, Ivan would descend into underground chambers to consult ancient texts during times of political crisis, emerging with quotations from authors whose works were unknown even to learned Europeans of the time. More substantial evidence comes from the Chronicle of Maxim the Greek, a learned monk who translated religious texts for the Russian court. Maxim wrote of seeing books in Greek and Latin, ancient beyond measure, stored in chambers where silence dwells eternal. He described manuscripts written on papyrus rather than parchment, bound in covers of ivory and precious metals, containing works by classical authors whose names appeared in no other surviving sources. Archaeological investigation of the Kremlins foundations has revealed extensive underground tunnel systems, some dating to the reign of Ivan III or earlier. Ground-penetrating radar has detected large voids beneath the palace foundations, suggesting the presence of chambers that have remained sealed for centuries. However, attempts at exploration have been hindered by political concerns, structural considerations, and the sheer complexity of the underground network. The potential contents of libraries stagger the imagination. Byzantine scholars fleeing Constantinople had access to manuscripts stretching back to the classical period, including works from the Library of Alexandria that survived the various destructions of that legendary institution. Complete plays by Sophocles and Euripides, lost books of Livy's history, works by scientists and philosophers known only through fragmentary quotations. Any or all of these treasures might rest in the Moscow underground. Religious manuscripts represent another category of potentially revolutionary material. The Byzantine Empire preserved traditions of Christian scholarship that developed independently from Western European patterns. Early gospel manuscripts, variant traditions of apostolic writings, theological treatises that influenced Eastern Christianity but never reached the West. Such materials could dramatically alter understanding of early Christian development. Scientific and technical works pose equally exciting possibilities. Byzantine scholars maintained mathematical and astronomical traditions derived from ancient Greek sources, some of which may have been lost when Islamic libraries were destroyed during the Mongol invasions. Treatises on medicine, engineering, and natural philosophy that could illuminate the continuity between classical and medieval knowledge might await discovery in the Kremlin's depths. Soviet-era investigations during the 1960s reportedly detected significant underground spaces near the Kremlin's Cathedral Square, but official records of these explorations remain classified. Informal accounts from workers involved in foundation repairs describe encounters with sealed chambers containing wooden chests, though whether these contain books or other materials remains unknown. Political sensitivities during the Cold War prevented systematic archaeological investigation. More recent technological advances offer new possibilities for exploring the underground spaces without structural damage. High-resolution ground-penetrating radar, seismic tomography, and other non-invasive techniques could map the hidden chambers with unprecedented precision. However, such investigations require official approval that has thus far been withheld, leaving the mystery intact. Alternative theories suggest that Ivan's library may have been dispersed or destroyed during the time of troubles that followed his death in 1584. The political chaos and foreign invasions of this period saw many royal treasures looted or lost. Some manuscripts might have been smuggled abroad, sold to private collectors, or hidden in monasteries throughout Russia where they await rediscovery. The enduring appeal of Ivan's lost library reflects deeper human longings for connection with vanished wisdom. In an age when knowledge seems increasingly fragmented and ephemeral, the possibility of discovering intact archives from the past offers hope for recovering lost continuities and forgotten insights. Whether the library exists as described or represents a romantic myth, its legend speaks to the eternal human desire to preserve and transmit knowledge across the generations. While some knowledge hides in darkness, other wisdom dissolves into legend. Within the labyrinthine chambers of Prague Castle, where shadows dance between Gothic arches and whispered secrets echo through stone corridors, there once flourished a court unlike any other in Renaissance Europe. Emperor Rudolf II, that melancholic Habsburg dreamer, transformed his Bohemian capital into a sanctuary for the most brilliant and mysterious minds of the age. Here, in the narrow houses of Golden Lane and the castle's hidden laboratories, alchemists pursued transmutations that transcended the mere conversion of base metals into gold, seeking instead to unlock the fundamental structures of reality itself. Rudolf's court attracted figures who moved like phantoms through the borderlands between science and magic. John Dee, the enigmatic English mathematician and mystic, arrived bearing charts of angelic communications and mechanical devices that seemed to blur the distinction between clockwork and consciousness. Edward Kelly, his volatile companion, claimed to channel spirits who revealed the locations of buried treasures and the formulas for metallic transformation. Rabbi Judah Lo Ben Bezal, the legendary creator of the Golem, maintained laboratories where Kabbalistic meditation merged with practical chemistry in pursuit of divine insights. The emperor himself was no mere patron, but an active participant in these investigations. Contemporary accounts describe Rudolf spending entire nights in underground chambers, his pale hands stained with chemical residues, his eyes reflecting the glow of furnaces that burned with fires of unusual colors. He sought not political power but metaphysical understanding, believing that alchemical research could reveal the hidden correspondences between terrestrial and celestial realms. The alchemical laboratories of Prague represented the culmination of centuries of Hermetic tradition. These were not crude workshops, but sophisticated research facilities equipped with distillation apparatus, furnaces capable of achieving precisely controlled temperatures, and libraries containing texts in dozens of languages. The practitioners worked within theoretical frameworks that combine Aristotelian natural philosophy, Neoplatonic metaphysics, and Islamic scientific traditions into coherent systems for investigating material transformation. Central to their enterprise was the conviction that matter itself possessed consciousness, that metals grew like living beings within the earth, ascending through stages of development toward the perfection represented by gold. The alchemist's role was not to force these transformations, but to understand and accelerate natural processes through careful application of heat, solution, and spiritual intervention. Each substance possessed its own temperament and timing. Successful transmutation required both technical skill and intuitive sensitivity to the hidden life of matter. The philosophical implications of this worldview extended far beyond metallurgy. If base metals could achieve perfection through proper treatment, then human consciousness might undergo similar transformations. The quest for the philosopher's stone became simultaneously a search for spiritual illumination with laboratory work serving as both practical investigation and symbolic meditation. The alchemists who successfully transmuted lead into gold would have demonstrated mastery over the fundamental forces that govern both material and spiritual evolution. Surviving fragments from Rudolph's era describe experimental results that challenge conventional understanding of Renaissance chemistry. Manuscripts speak of metals that displayed impossible properties, iron that became transparent under specific conditions, silver that exhibited magnetic characteristics, copper that changed color in response to emotional states of nearby observers. Modern skeptics dismiss these accounts as fantasy or fraud. Yet the precision of the descriptions and the consistency across multiple independent sources suggest that something genuinely anomalous was occurring in Prague's laboratories. The sudden dispersal of Rudolph's court following his death in 1612 marked the end of this extraordinary period of investigation. The 30 Years' War scattered the alchemists across Europe, while political authorities, increasingly suspicious of Hermetic practices, seized manuscripts and apparatus. The techniques and theories that had been developed through decades of careful research vanished as if they had never existed, leaving behind only tantalizing hints in encrypted texts and cryptic symbols carved into castle walls. Some researchers proposed that the alchemists achieved genuine discoveries that were later forgotten or suppressed. The sophisticated understanding of chemical processes, evident in their writings, suggests practical knowledge that wouldn't be formally recognized until the development of modern chemistry centuries later. Their experiments with electrical phenomena, crystalline structures, and what would now be called catalytic reactions may have uncovered principles that orthodox science was not yet prepared to acknowledge. The psychological dimension of alchemical practice offers another avenue for understanding their achievements. The prolonged meditation on symbolic transformations, combined with exposure to various chemical vapors and the altered states of consciousness induced by intensive laboratory work, may have facilitated insights into the nature of reality that operated through non-rational channels. The alchemists were, in effect, conducting experiments in consciousness as much as chemistry, exploring the boundaries between subjective experience and objective phenomena. Modern attempts to recreate alchemical procedures have yielded ambiguous results. Some researchers report unusual effects that seem to exceed conventional chemical explanations, while others find nothing beyond what established science would predict. The discrepancy may reflect the loss of subtle techniques or contextual factors that the original practitioners considered essential, but failed to record in their surviving texts. The mystery of Prague's alchemical achievements illuminates broader questions about the relationship between scientific knowledge and historical context. Were these investigators pursuing dead ends based on mistaken assumptions about the nature of matter? Or did they discover genuine phenomena that later science overlooked in its rush toward mechanistic explanations? The question remains suspended in the amber of historical uncertainty, neither definitively answered nor completely dismissed. From chambers of transformation, the thread leads to halls of impossible music. In the quiet workshops of a northern Italian city, where morning light filters through windows overlooking cobblestone streets, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, there once occurred a convergence of artistry and science that has never been replicated. Cremona, between the years 1650 and 1750, became the birthplace of musical instruments so exquisite that their voices continue to entrance listeners 3 centuries later. Yet the secrets of their creation died with their makers, leaving modern craftsmen to puzzle over techniques that transformed humble wood and varnish into vessels of transcendent sound. The names themselves carry the weight of legend: Antonio Stradivari, Giuseppe Guarneri del Gesù, the Amati family whose innovations established the violin's fundamental design. These master luthiers worked within a tradition that treated instrument making not merely as craftsmanship, but as a form of applied natural philosophy, requiring deep understanding of acoustic principles, wood science, and the mysterious relationship between material properties and aesthetic expression. A Stradivarius violin possesses qualities that confound scientific analysis even today. The wood, carefully selected alpine spruce and maple, exhibits cellular structures that seem to optimize resonance in ways that controlled cultivation cannot replicate. Dendrochronological studies reveal that these trees grew during a period of unusually consistent climate, producing wood with grain patterns and density variations that contemporary forests rarely yield. The climatic conditions of the Little Ice Age, with its long cold winters and brief, intense summers, created growth patterns that enhanced the acoustic properties of the timber. Yet, wood selection represents only the beginning of the mystery. The varnishes applied by Cremonese makers display chemical compositions that remain partially unexplained. Spectroscopic analysis has identified minerals and organic compounds that suggest knowledge of chemistry far beyond what was formally recognized in the 17th century. Some researchers propose that the violin makers had access to alchemical traditions that informed their choice of materials and treatment methods. The physical construction of these instruments reveals engineering insights that anticipate modern acoustic science by centuries. The precise thickness variations in the sound plates, measured to fractions of millimeters, create resonance patterns that maximize both volume and tonal complexity. The internal sound holes and corner blocks are positioned with mathematical precision that suggests sophisticated understanding of wave mechanics and harmonic relationships. Modern attempts to reverse engineer Stradivarius violins have employed techniques ranging from computerized tomography to electron microscopy, yet perfect replication remains elusive. Contemporary makers can create instruments that approximate the visual appearance and basic acoustic properties of the master's work, but the subtle qualities that distinguish a great violin, the projection, the complex overtone structure, the responsiveness to the player's touch, continue to escape duplication. The mystery deepens when considering the workshop conditions in which these instruments were created. The Cremonese makers worked without precise measurement tools, relying instead on eye, hand, and ear to guide their work. They possess no theoretical framework for understanding sound propagation, yet their intuitive grasp of acoustic principles produce results that contemporary science struggles to explain. The knowledge was transmitted through apprenticeship, systems that emphasized feel and tradition over formal analysis. Some researchers propose that the secret lies not in any single factor, but in the convergence of multiple environmental and cultural conditions that cannot be recreated. The wood, the climate, the local traditions, the social environment that supported extended artistic development, all these elements combined in Cremona during its golden age to create circumstances that fostered exceptional achievement. The chemical analysis of Cremonese varnishes has revealed unexpected complexity. Layers of different compositions were applied in specific sequences, creating surface treatments that influence both the appearance and acoustic properties of the instruments. Some formulations include minerals that were not widely available in Europe, suggesting trade connections that brought exotic materials to these workshop laboratories. Recent studies using synchrotron radiation have penetrated the varnish layers without damage, revealing application techniques that demonstrate extraordinary in the quiet workshops of a northern Italian city, where morning light filters through windows overlooking cobblestone streets, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, there once occurred a convergence of artistry and science that has never been replicated. Cremona, between the years 1650 and 1750, became the birthplace of musical instruments so exquisite that their voices continue to entrance listeners 3 centuries later. Yet the secrets of their creation died with their makers, leaving modern craftsmen to puzzle over techniques that transformed humble wood and varnish into vessels of transcendent sound. The names themselves carry the weight of legend: Antonio Stradivari, Giuseppe Guarneri del Gesù, the Amati family whose innovations established the violin's fundamental design. These master luthiers worked within a tradition that treated instrument making not merely as craftsmanship, but as a form of applied natural philosophy, requiring deep understanding of acoustic principles, wood science, and the mysterious relationship between material properties and aesthetic expression. A Stradivarius violin possesses qualities that confound scientific analysis even today. The wood, carefully selected alpine spruce and maple, exhibits cellular structures that seem to optimize resonance in ways that controlled cultivation cannot replicate. Dendrochronological studies reveal that these trees grew during a period of unusually consistent climate, producing wood with grain patterns and density variations that contemporary forests rarely yield. The climatic conditions of the Little Ice Age, with its long, cold winters and brief, intense summers, created growth patterns that enhanced the acoustic properties of the timber. Yet, wood selection represents only in the red dust highlands of Mali, where ancient baobab trees stand sentinel over villages that have witnessed the passage of countless seasons. The Dogon people preserve astronomical knowledge that challenges fundamental assumptions about the transmission of scientific understanding across cultures and centuries. Their creation myths speak with startling precision about cosmic phenomena that Western astronomy discovered only through powerful telescopes in the 19th and 20th centuries, raising profound questions about the sources and pathways of human knowledge. The Dogon cosmology centers on Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, which they call Sigitolo, or Star of Sigui. But their understanding extends far beyond this visible beacon to encompass what they describe as its invisible companion, Potolo, a star so dense and heavy that all earthly beings combined could not lift even a small portion of it. This description, recorded by French anthropologists Marcel Grial and Germain Dieterlen in the 1940s, corresponds with remarkable accuracy to Sirius B, a white dwarf star that orbits the primary star every 50 years. The existence of Sirius B was first hypothesized by German astronomer Friedrich Bessel in 1844, based on perturbations in Sirius A's proper motion, but the companion star was not directly observed until 1862, when telescope technology advanced sufficiently to separate the two objects. The Dogon not only knew of this invisible star, but understood its orbital period and its extreme density knowledge that should have been impossible to acquire through naked eye observation of the night sky. Dogon elders speak of the star as composed of Sigala, a substance so heavy that a grain the size of a millet seed would weigh as much as a donkey. This description approximates the actual density of white dwarf matter, which can exceed 1 million times the density of water. They describe Potolo as the smallest and heaviest of all stars, rotating on its axis while orbiting around Sigi. Tolo, details that align precisely with modern astrophysical understanding of the Sirius system. The Dogon astronomical knowledge extends beyond Sirius to encompass other celestial phenomena that would seem to require telescopic observation. They describe Jupiter as having 4 main satellites, Saturn as having rings, and the Milky Way as composed of countless distant stars arranged in a spiral pattern. Their creation myths speak of multiple star systems, black holes described as dark stars that swallow light, and galaxies beyond their own that contain billions of stars. Perhaps most intriguingly, Dogon traditions describe visitors from the Sirius system, amphibious beings called Namo, who arrived on Earth in a spinning arc that descended from the sky accompanied by fire and thunder. These beings supposedly brought knowledge of astronomy, agriculture, and metalworking to early humanity before returning to their home among the stars. The Namo are depicted in Dogon art as fish-like creatures with human characteristics. Beings equally at home in water and on land, the transmission of this knowledge within Dogon culture occurs through elaborate initiation ceremonies that can span decades. The astronomical information is not taught directly, but embedded within complex mythological narratives that require deep cultural understanding to decode. Only the most learned priests and elders possess complete knowledge of the cosmological system, and even they reveal it only gradually to properly prepared initiates. French anthropologists documented these traditions through years of patient fieldwork, gradually earning the trust of Dogon elders who initially shared only fragments of their knowledge. The consistency of the astronomical details across different villages and informants suggests a genuine traditional knowledge system, rather than recent contamination from Western sources. The information was recorded before the nature of white dwarf stars was widely known, making coincidental correspondence unlikely. Skeptics have proposed various explanations for the Vanishing, Dogon's apparent knowledge of Sirius B. Some suggest that the astronomical details were inadvertently introduced by Western visitors in the early 20th century and subsequently woven into traditional narratives. Others argue that the correspondence between Dogon beliefs and modern astronomy has been exaggerated through selective interpretation of ambiguous mythological content. However, these explanations struggle to account for the sophistication and specificity of Dogon astronomical knowledge. The details about stellar density, orbital periods, and cosmic structure demonstrate understanding that goes far beyond casual exposure to Western astronomy textbooks. The integration of this information into complex mythological frameworks that govern social organization, ritual practice, and artistic expression suggests deep cultural roots rather than recent borrowing. Alternative interpretations focus on the possibility of independent astronomical discovery through careful naked eye observation combined with oral tradition preservation systems. Some researchers propose that ancient African astronomers achieved sophisticated understanding through generations of systematic sky watching, developing techniques for detecting celestial phenomena that modern astronomy considers impossible. Without telescopic aid, the question of how the Dogon acquired their astronomical knowledge remains unresolved. But their traditions illuminate broader questions about the nature of scientific discovery and cultural transmission. If such detailed knowledge of invisible celestial phenomena could arise independently within an oral culture, what other scientific insights might be preserved in mythological traditions that Western scholarship has dismissed as primitive superstition? Thus, Dogon star knowledge serves as a reminder that human understanding of the cosmos has followed many different paths, not all of which conform to the linear progress narrative that characterizes Western scientific history. Their preserved wisdom speaks to possibilities of knowledge acquisition that transcend the boundaries of conventional academic frameworks, suggesting that the universe reveals its secrets through channels that remain mysterious even to those who claim to understand them best. From star knowledge flows the mystery of navigation across impossible distances. Beneath the turquoise waters off the coast of southern Turkey, where ancient Lycia's mountains meet the Mediterranean's eternal embrace, lies a wooden vessel that speaks of a world far more interconnected than historians once imagined possible. The Mahabalipuram shipwreck, dating to approximately 1300 BCE, carried cargo from at least 12 different civilizations across a trading network that spanned 3 continents and challenged every assumption about Bronze Age commerce, navigation, and cultural exchange. When nautical archaeologists first excavated this time capsule from the late Bronze Age, they uncovered evidence of a global economy whose sophistication rivals that of much later historical periods. The ship's hold contained copper ingots from Cyprus, tin from Afghanistan's remote mountains, amber from the Baltic forests, ivory from African elephants, and gold from Nubia. Glass beads bore the signature of Mesopotamian workshops, while cedar logs spoke of Lebanese forests. Most remarkably, the cargo included a single ton of terebinth resin, valued in antiquity for its use in religious ceremonies and medicinal preparations. The implications of this ancient manifest stagger the imagination. How did Bronze Age merchants coordinate trade across such vast distances without modern communication systems? What diplomatic and commercial relationships enabled the peaceful passage of valuable cargo through territories controlled by competing kingdoms? The Oluboran ship represents not an isolated voyage, but a single thread in a complex web of exchange that connected civilizations. From Britain to India. The navigation techniques required for such voyages remain largely mysterious. Bronze Age. Sailors possessed no magnetic compasses, no precise chronometers, no detailed charts of coastal waters. Yet they successfully traversed thousands of miles of open ocean, timing their journeys to seasonal wind patterns and following celestial navigation techniques that have been lost to history. The precision required to locate specific ports along unmarked coastlines suggests navigational knowledge of extraordinary sophistication. Recent analysis of the ship's construction reveals technological innovations that anticipate later maritime developments by centuries. The hull was built using a shell-first technique that provided exceptional strength and flexibility, allowing the vessel to withstand the stresses of long ocean voyages. The timber selection demonstrates understanding of wood properties and joinery methods that would not be formally documented until classical antiquity. The crew's personal possessions, scattered across the wreck site, tell stories of individual lives caught up in these vast commercial networks. Bronze tools bear the marks of craftsmen from different cultural traditions, while seals and jewelry reflect artistic influences that crossed linguistic and political boundaries. A gold medallion carries cuneiform inscriptions alongside Egyptian hieroglyphs, suggesting either multilingual literacy or cultural synthesis that transcends modern understanding of ancient societies. The sudden collapse of this Bronze Age trading system around 1200 BCE represents one of history's great mysteries. Within a few generations, the sophisticated commercial networks that supported civilizations from Greece to Mesopotamia disintegrated. Cities were abandoned, and entire peoples disappeared from the historical record. The mysterious sea peoples, mentioned in Egyptian texts as raiders and migrants, may have been both cause and consequence of this civilizational collapse. Archaeological evidence from sites across the eastern Mediterranean reveals a pattern of destruction and abandonment that suggests coordinated attacks by maritime forces. Palace complexes burned, harbor installations were destroyed, and coastal settlements were either sacked or hastily evacuated. The written records of this period speak of invasions by peoples from the sea whose origins and motivations remain obscure. Some scholars propose that environmental factors triggered the collapse of Bronze Age civilization. Climatic analysis suggests that the late 13th century BCE witnessed severe droughts across the Mediterranean region, potentially disrupting agricultural systems that supported large urban populations. The resulting economic stress may have forced previously settled peoples to become raiders and migrants, destroying the very trading networks they had once depended upon. The technological implications of Bronze Age maritime trade challenge conventional narratives about human progress. The ability to organize and execute long-distance voyages carrying tons of cargo required sophisticated understanding of ship design, weather patterns, and navigation techniques. The coordination of production and distribution across multiple civilizations implies communication systems and diplomatic relationships of remarkable complexity that modern reconstructions of Bronze Age sailing conditions have revealed the extraordinary skill required for successful navigation. Experimental voyages using replicas of ancient vessels demonstrate that even experienced modern sailors struggle to maintain course and speed using only Bronze Age navigation techniques. The ancient mariners possessed knowledge of wind patterns, current systems, and celestial movements that enabled them to traverse vast distances with confidence and precision. The cargo assemblage from Mahabalipuram also illuminates the religious and symbolic dimensions of Bronze Age trade. Many items appear to have carried spiritual as well as economic value: amber for its supposed magical properties, ivory for royal and divine imagery, precious metals for temple ornamentation. The merchants were not merely transporting commodities, but facilitating the exchange of beliefs, technologies, and cultural practices across vast distances. The mystery of Bronze Age navigation extends beyond technical considerations to encompass questions about knowledge transmission and cultural memory. How did navigational techniques developed through generations of experience survive the collapse of Bronze Age civilization? What fragments of maritime wisdom influenced later Greek, Phoenician, and Roman sailing traditions? The ghost fleet of ancient vessels continue beneath the turquoise waters off the coast of southern Turkey, where ancient Lycia's mountains meet the Mediterranean's eternal embrace. Lies a wooden vessel that speaks of a world far more interconnected than historians once imagined. On a triangular speck of volcanic rock, lost in the vast Pacific, nearly 2,000 miles from the nearest inhabited land, stands one of humanity's most haunting monuments to both achievement and loss. Easter Island, known to its people as Rapa Nui, bears witness to a civilization that created nearly 1,000 monumental statues, developed a unique writing system, and constructed massive ceremonial platforms, only to experience a transformation so profound that early European visitors found a population seemingly disconnected from the grandeur that surrounded them. The Moai statues themselves embody the paradox that defines Rapa Nui's history. These massive figures, carved from volcanic tuff and weighing up to 80 tons, were transported across the island's rugged terrain through methods that remain debated among archaeologists. Recent experiments have demonstrated that relatively small groups of people could walk the statues upright using rope systems, causing the Moai to rock forward in a manner that oral traditions describe as the statues walking to their destinations under their own power. Contrary to popular misconceptions fostered by decades of incomplete excavation, the Moai are not merely heads but full-body figures buried up to their necks by centuries of soil accumulation. When archaeologists began systematic excavation of the statue torsos, they revealed intricate carvings and proportions that demonstrate the sculptor's sophisticated understanding of human anatomy and artistic composition. Some figures stand over 30 feet tall when fully exposed, dwarfing visitors who walk among these silent guardians. The traditional narrative of Easter Island as a cautionary tale of ecological collapse has dominated popular understanding for generations. According to this interpretation, the island's original Polynesian settlers, arriving sometime between 800 and 1200 CE, gradually deforested their environment in pursuit of ever larger Moai, ultimately triggering societal collapse that reduced the population from perhaps 20,000 to fewer than 3,000 by the time of European contact. Recent archaeological and paleoecological Research has complicated this narrative considerably. Evidence suggests that the island's transformation resulted from multiple factors, operating over several centuries, rather than a sudden collapse driven solely by human mismanagement. The introduction of Polynesian rats, which consumed palm seeds and prevented forest regeneration, may have played a crucial role in deforestation. Climate variations during the Little Ice Age added environmental stress, while slave raids by Peruvian traders in the 1860s devastated the population and disrupted cultural continuity. The moai themselves represent not environmental destruction, but cultural resilience and sophisticated social organization. Each statue was carved to honor specific ancestors, maintaining spiritual connections between the living and the dead that were essential to Polynesian worldviews. The platforms on which many moai stand, called ahu, demonstrate engineering capabilities that rival those of other Polynesian societies, with precisely fitted stones creating stable foundations for multi-ton sculptures. The island's writing system, known as Rongorongo, adds another layer of mystery to Rapa Nui's cultural achievements. These glyphs, carved on wooden tablets and other objects, represent one of only a few independent inventions of writing in human history. The script remains largely undeciphered, though scholars have identified possible lunar calendars, genealogical records, and religious texts among the surviving examples. The loss of literacy following European contact has made translation extremely difficult, as no living speaker can reliably read the ancient symbols. Archaeological evidence reveals that Rapa Nui society was far more complex and adaptable than the collapse narrative suggests. The islanders developed sophisticated agricultural techniques, including rock gardens that protected crops from salt spray and created microclimates for cultivation. They maintained large populations through careful resource management and social cooperation that enabled the construction of hundreds of ceremonial platforms and nearly 1,000 statues. The moai quarry at Rano-Raraku, where nearly 400 statues remain in various stages of completion, provides insights into the organization and scale of the carving operations. Different workshops specialized in specific aspects of production, from initial rough shaping to final detail work. The unfinished statues suggest the work continued until quite late in the island's pre-contact period, challenging narratives of early societal collapse. Recent DNA analysis has revealed that the Rapa Nui people maintained contact with South American populations, documenting pre-Columbian voyages across thousands of miles of open ocean. Sweet potatoes, originally from South America, became a staple crop on the island, while chicken bones show genetic markers linking them to South American populations. These discoveries confirm the remarkable navigational capabilities of Polynesian voyagers who regularly traversed ocean distances that European explorers considered impossible. The cultural memory preserved in Rapa Nui oral traditions speaks of a complex society with sophisticated spiritual beliefs and social organization. The moai represented not mere status symbols, but embodied ancestors whose mana or spiritual power protected the living. The statue's positioning, facing inland toward the communities they guarded, reflects this protective function rather than any concern with impressing distant observers. The transformation of Rapa Nui society following European contact illustrates the fragility of isolated cultures when confronted with external diseases, slave raids, and cultural disruption. The population collapse of the 19th century, when diseases and Peruvian slave traders reduced the inhabitants to fewer than 100 individuals, represents a human tragedy that obliterated centuries of accumulated knowledge and cultural practice. Today, the moai continue to stand watch over their island home, their weathered faces bearing witness to human creativity, resilience, and loss. They remind visitors that even in Earth's most isolated places, Human communities created art and meaning that transcend the practical necessities of survival, leaving monuments that speak across centuries to anyone willing to listen to their silent testimony. On islands of memory, stone faces watch over secrets that time slowly reveals. Across the mist-shrouded moors of Brittany, where ancient Celtic winds carry whispers of forgotten ages, thousands of standing stones march in perfect alignment toward horizons that hold secrets older than written memory. The megalithic formations at Carnac stretch for miles across the French countryside, their weathered granite sentinels bearing witness to Neolithic ambitions that dwarf the monuments of later civilizations. Yet their purpose remains as enigmatic as the people who raised them from the earth 5,000 years before Christ walked among mortals. The sheer scale of the Carnac alignment staggers comprehension. More than 3,000 menhirs, some towering 20 feet above the heathland, others modest markers barely clearing the grass, form parallel rows that extend across nearly 8 miles of countryside. The stones were quarried from local granite formations, shaped with stone tools, and transported across the rolling terrain through methods that remain mysterious to modern engineers. The largest specimens weigh over 300 tons, requiring organizational capabilities that challenge assumptions about Neolithic society. Recent acoustic research has revealed unexpected properties embedded within these ancient configurations. The stones appear to have been positioned to create specific sound environments, amplifying certain frequencies while dampening others. When wind moves through the alignments, particularly during storms, the megaliths produce low-frequency resonances that can be felt as much as heard. Some researchers propose that these acoustic effects were deliberately designed to facilitate altered states of consciousness during ritual gatherings. The precision of the alignments suggests sophisticated understanding of astronomical cycles and mathematical relationships. Computer analysis has identified correlations between stone positions and celestial events, including lunar standstills, solar solstices, and the rising points of significant star groups. The builders appear to have encoded complex calendrical information into the landscape itself, creating a three-dimensional astronomical computer that tracked cosmic cycles across multiple time scales. Archaeological excavations around the stones have revealed evidence of prolonged ritual activity spanning centuries. Burnt offerings, broken pottery, and worked amber from the Baltic indicate that Carnac served as a pilgrimage destination drawing visitors from across Neolithic Europe. The accumulation of artifacts suggests continuous ceremonial use rather than simple monument construction, as if the stone rows facilitated ongoing communication between human communities and cosmic forces. The quarrying and transportation of the megaliths required engineering solutions that demonstrate remarkable innovation. Recent experiments using replica stones and Neolithic tools have shown that relatively small groups could move massive blocks using wooden rollers, earth ramps, and carefully orchestrated human labor. However, the precision placement of thousands of stones across miles of terrain implies planning and coordination capabilities that exceed what archaeologists typically attribute to Neolithic societies. Geomagnetic surveys have detected subtle but significant variations in the Earth's magnetic field around the stone alignments. Some megaliths were positioned over underground watercourses or geological features that create localized magnetic anomalies. Whether these placements were intentional or coincidental remains unclear, but the correlation between stone positions and geophysical phenomena suggests that the builders possessed knowledge of terrestrial energies that modern science is only beginning to understand. The cultural context surrounding Carnac's construction reveals a civilization far more sophisticated than traditional models of Neolithic life suggest. The builders possessed advanced knowledge of astronomy, engineering, and landscape management. They coordinated massive construction projects that required precise planning and sustained cooperation across generations. The monuments represent not primitive superstition, but systematic investigation of humanity's relationship with cosmic cycles and terrestrial forces. Oral traditions preserved in Breton folklore speak of the stones as petrified soldiers, giants turned to stone by divine intervention, or markers left by ancient peoples who possessed magical knowledge. These narratives, while clearly mythological, may preserve fragments of actual historical memory about the megalith's original purposes. The consistency of certain details across different local traditions suggests possible continuity with prehistoric beliefs. Modern attempts to understand the builder's intentions have employed increasingly sophisticated analytical techniques. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed additional buried structures around the visible alignments, suggesting that Carnac represents only the surviving portion of a much larger sacred landscape. Satellite imagery has identified possible connections between the stone rows and other megalithic sites across Brittany, indicating regional planning that encompasses hundreds of square miles. The astronomical alignments embedded within the stone configurations demonstrate mathematical sophistication that predates formal geometry by millennia. The builders understood complex relationships between celestial cycles and translated this knowledge into permanent landscape features. The monuments function as both calendar and temple, enabling accurate tracking of seasonal changes while creating sacred spaces for community ritual. Recent discoveries of similar megalithic alignments in other parts of Europe suggest that Carnac represents part of a widespread cultural phenomenon rather than an isolated achievement. From the Orkney Islands to the Iberian Peninsula, Neolithic communities created monumental landscapes that demonstrate shared understanding of astronomical principles and ritual practices. The exchange of knowledge across such vast distances implies communication networks and cultural connections that challenge traditional models of prehistoric isolation. The enduring mystery of Carnac lies not merely in deciphering the builder's specific intentions, but in comprehending the worldview that motivated such extraordinary effort. These monuments represent humanity's earliest attempt to create permanent dialogue between across the mist-shrouded moors of Brittany, where ancient Celtic winds carry whispers of forgotten ages. Thousands of standing stones march in perfect alignment toward horizons that hold secrets older than written memory. The megalithic formations at Carnac stretch for miles across the French countryside, their weathered granite sentinels bearing witness to Neolithic ambitions that dwarf the monuments of later civilizations. Yet in museum collections and private galleries around the world, crystalline artifacts rest beneath protective glass, their polished surfaces reflecting light with a clarity that seems to transcend mere mineral composition. These enigmatic objects, skulls, carved from single pieces of quartz, vessels hewn from blocks of crystal, ornaments shaped with impossible precision challenge conventional understanding of ancient technology while raising profound questions about the relationship between human consciousness and the hidden properties of crystalline matter. The most famous of these artifacts, the Mitchell Hedges crystal skull, discovered in British Honduras during the 1920s, demonstrates craftsmanship that defies explanation through conventional archaeological frameworks. Carved from a single piece of clear quartz, the skull exhibits anatomical accuracy that rivals modern medical models. The surface shows no tool marks despite the extreme hardness of quartz, suggesting manufacturing techniques that remain mysterious even to us. Contemporary gem cutters equipped with diamond-tipped instruments and computer-controlled machinery. Scientific analysis has revealed construction methods that challenge assumptions about pre-Columbian technology. The skull was apparently shaped through a process of controlled abrasion that would have required decades of patient work using progressively finer abrasives. The level of detail particularly in areas like the eye sockets and nasal cavity, demonstrates understanding of human anatomy that seems disproportionate to the supposed technological capabilities of the cultures credited with its creation. However, the crystal skulls exist within a complex web of archaeological controversy and modern fabrication. While some specimens display genuinely ancient characteristics, others show clear evidence of modern tool marks and artificial aging techniques. The challenge lies in distinguishing authentic, pre-Columbian artifacts from sophisticated 19th and 20th century reproductions created to satisfy the growing collector market for exotic archaeological specimens, the authentic crystal. Objects that have survived rigorous scientific scrutiny demonstrate technological capabilities that orthodox archaeology struggles to accommodate. Electron microscopy reveals surface treatments that appear to have been achieved through techniques unknown to conventional lapidary practice. Some artifacts exhibit internal stress patterns that suggest heating and cooling cycles designed to enhance specific optical properties. Beyond their technical mysteries, crystal artifacts raise intriguing questions about the role of crystalline structures in ancient spiritual and healing practices. Quartz crystals possess piezoelectric properties that generate electrical charges under mechanical stress, potentially creating subtle electromagnetic fields that can influence biological systems. Ancient cultures may have recognized these properties empirically, incorporating crystal objects into ritual practices designed to enhance consciousness or facilitate healing. Archaeological evidence from various cultures indicates widespread use of crystal and other transparent stones. In ceremonial contexts, Olmec, Maya, and Aztec sites have yielded crystal mirrors, vessels, and ornaments that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of optical properties. Similar objects appear in ancient Egyptian, Chinese, and Indian contexts, suggesting that knowledge of crystal working was more widespread than conventional archaeology acknowledges that the manufacturing techniques required to shape crystalline materials without metal tools remain partially mysterious. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that patient abrasion using sand, water, and wooden implements can achieve remarkable precision, but the timescales involved, potentially decades for a single complex object, raise questions about the social organization necessary to support such extended projects. Recent research into the properties of various crystal formations has revealed unexpected complexity in their electromagnetic and optical characteristics. Different crystal structures exhibit unique resonance frequencies, thermal properties, and light transmission characteristics that can have practical applications in technologies that ancient peoples might have developed through empirical experimentation. The geographical distribution of crystal artifacts suggests extensive trade networks that move raw materials across vast distances. Clear quartz suitable for large carvings occurs in relatively few locations, yet crystal objects appear in archaeological contexts thousands of miles from the nearest sources. This distribution pattern implies either far-reaching commercial relationships or the existence of sophisticated transportation systems that have left little archaeological trace. Modern attempts to replicate ancient crystal working techniques have yielded mixed results. While contemporary craftsmen can approximate the visual appearance of ancient artifacts, achieving the subtle surface qualities and internal characteristics of authentic specimens remains challenging. The discrepancy suggests that ancient practitioners possess knowledge or techniques that have not been fully reconstructed. The optical properties of crystal artifacts may have served practical as well as ceremonial purposes. Clear crystal can function as a lens, magnifying glass, or fire starter under appropriate conditions. Some researchers propose that ancient peoples developed sophisticated optical instruments using crystalline materials, potentially achieving visual capabilities that enhanced astronomical observation or detailed craftwork. The mysterious aspects of crystal artifacts extend beyond their manufacture to encompass their preservation and cultural significance. Many specimens have survived for centuries or millennia without significant damage, despite the brittleness of quartz and other crystalline materials. This longevity suggests either exceptional care in handling and storage or inherent properties that enhance durability under specific conditions. The continuing fascination with crystal artifacts reflects deeper human intuitions about the relationship between consciousness and crystalline structures. Whether these objects represent advanced ancient technology, sophisticated artistic achievement, or something more mysterious, they embody humanity's persistent effort to find meaning and power in the hidden properties of the natural world. Clear as crystal, yet opaque as shadow, some mysteries resist all illumination. Beneath Antarctica's eternal ice, locked in crystalline silence that has endured for millions of years, lies a landscape that may rewrite the history of human exploration and cartographic knowledge. Satellite-penetrating radar and seismic surveys have revealed mountain ranges, valleys, and coastal features that correspond with startling accuracy to geographical details shown on medieval maps, created centuries before Antarctica's official discovery in 1820. These correspondences suggest either extraordinary coincidence or the preservation of ancient knowledge about Earth's most remote continent. The most famous of these cartographic enigmas is the Piri Reis map of 1513, created by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri ibn Haji Mehmed. This partial world map shows the coastlines of South America, Africa, and what appears to be Antarctica with remarkable precision, depicting geographical features that would not be officially documented until the 20th century. Most intriguingly, the Antarctic coastline shown on the map corresponds not to the ice-covered continent visible today, but to the actual bedrock topography hidden beneath miles of accumulated ice. Modern analysis using computer modeling and satellite data has confirmed that Piri Reis's Antarctic coastline matches the subglacial topography with an accuracy that seems impossible given 16th century exploration capabilities. The map shows bays, peninsulas, and coastal mountains that align precisely with features revealed only through ice-penetrating radar surveys conducted in recent decades. This correspondence suggests either access to incredibly sophisticated surveying techniques or reliance on much older source materials. The Piri Reis map explicitly references ancient sources, including charts used by Christopher Columbus and maps based on even earlier materials dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. The admiral claimed to have consulted more than 20 source maps, some of which supposedly originated in the Library of Alexandria. This chain of cartographic transmission hints at geographical knowledge that may stretch back to classical antiquity or beyond. Other medieval maps display similar anomalies that challenge conventional understanding of geographical discovery. The erroneous Phineas map of 1531 shows Antarctica as a continent-sized landmass with rivers, mountains, and coastal details that correspond to actual subglacial features. The Boischet map of 1754 depicts Antarctica as two separate landmasses connected by an isthmus, a configuration that matches recent discoveries about the continent's true topography beneath the ice sheet. These cartographic mysteries raise profound questions about ancient navigation capabilities and geographical knowledge. If medieval cartographers had access to accurate information about Antarctica's ice-free coastline, this implies either much earlier exploration of the continent or preservation of knowledge from periods when the ice sheet was less extensive. Geological evidence indicates that parts of Antarctica were indeed ice-free during certain periods within human history, potentially allowing ancient mariners to map the coastline directly. The precision of the ancient cartographic data suggests surveying techniques of remarkable sophistication. Accurate mapping of Antarctica's complex coastline would require systematic exploration using multiple ships, careful measurement of distances and angles, and methods for determining precise geographical coordinates. The logistical challenges of such an undertaking would have demanded organizational capabilities and technological resources that seem inconsistent with known ancient civilizations. Some researchers propose that the anomalous maps reflect inherited knowledge from much earlier periods when Earth's climate was different and Antarctica was more accessible to navigation. During the last glacial maximum, sea levels were significantly lower, and ice distributions were different from current patterns. Ancient peoples with sophisticated maritime capabilities might have explored and mapped regions that later became inaccessible due to climate change. Alternative explanations focus on the possibility of exceptionally advanced ancient civilizations that possess navigational and surveying techniques that have been lost to history. The precision of the geographical data preserved in medieval maps suggests mathematical and astronomical knowledge that enabled accurate determination of latitude and longitude centuries before the development of precision chronometers and other standard navigational instruments. Recent discoveries beneath Antarctica's ice sheet have revealed unexpected complexity in the continent's geological and hydrological systems. Vast underground lakes, mountain ranges comparable to the Alps, and river valleys that were active within recent geological time create a hidden landscape that may preserve evidence of ancient human activity. Ground-penetrating radar has detected geometric anomalies that some researchers interpret as possible artificial structures. Though such claims remain highly speculative, the technological implications of accurate Antarctic mapping extend beyond navigation to encompass broader questions about ancient scientific capabilities. The mathematical knowledge required to create precise maps would also enable sophisticated engineering, astronomical calculation, and perhaps technologies that have left no obvious archaeological trace. The possibility of advanced ancient science challenges fundamental assumptions about the linear progression of human knowledge. Climate research has revealed that Antarctica's ice sheet has fluctuated significantly over geological time, with periods of partial melting that could have exposed substantial portions of the continent's coastline. During these ice-free periods, which may have occurred within the time frame of human civilization, Antarctica could have supported ecosystems and perhaps even human settlements that were later entombed beneath advancing glaciers. The preservation of accurate geographical information about ice-free Antarctica through centuries or millennia of cultural transmission represents an extraordinary achievement in collective memory. Such preservation would require institutional knowledge systems capable of maintaining precise technical information across multiple generations, suggesting social organizations of remarkable sophistication and continuity. Whether the medieval maps reflect ancient exploration, inherited knowledge, or coincidental accuracy, they illuminate the complexity of human geographical understanding and the possibility that our ancestors achieved feats of exploration and cartography that have been forgotten by conventional history. The phantom peaks hidden beneath Antarctic ice continue to guard their secrets, waiting perhaps for technologies and insights that can finally separate legend from reality. Ice preserves more than landscapes. It holds the breath of vanished worlds. In remote corners of the world's great deserts, where silence reigns so complete that heartbeats seem to echo across endless dunes, there exist places where the sand itself becomes a musical instrument of impossible grandeur. These singing sands, known to Bedouins as the voice of the desert and to Chinese travelers as the drums of the gods, produce sounds that range from deep organ tones to high, crystalline bells, creating acoustic phenomena that have puzzled scientists and enchanted wanderers for thousands of years. The Gobi Desert singing Dunes stretch across Mongolia like a frozen ocean of golden sand. They are carefully sculpted slopes rising 300 feet above the surrounding steppe. When conditions align, the right temperature, humidity, and wind patterns, these massive formations emit sounds that can be heard from miles away. Local herders speak of voices calling from beneath the sand, messages from ancient spirits who once inhabited cities now buried beneath the dunes. Marco Polo, crossing the Silk Road in the 13th century, wrote of terrifying sounds that emerged from desert sands during his journey through Central Asia. He described hearing the sounds of all kinds of musical instruments, and also of drums and the clash of arms. Noises so realistic that travelers would veer from their intended paths, believing they heard approaching armies or distant festivals. The phenomena were so consistent and well known that medieval maps marked certain desert regions with warnings about the singing sands. Scientific investigation has revealed that the acoustic properties of singing sands result from a complex interaction of grain size, moisture content, and mechanical disturbance. The sand particles must be remarkably uniform in size and shape, typically between 0.1 and 0.5 millimeters in diameter, and possess extremely clean surfaces free of dust or clay contamination. When these precise conditions are met, the movement of sand creates resonant frequencies that can reach volumes exceeding 100 decibels. The mechanism behind sand songs involves what physicists term synchronized avalanching. When a critical mass of sand begins to slide down a dune face, the individual grains align their movements in ways that create coherent sound waves. The frequency of these waves depends on the size and shape of the grains, while the amplitude relates to the volume of sand involved in the movement. Large dunes can produce sounds that continue for several minutes after the initial disturbance. However, the scientific explanation fails to account for many aspects of the phenomenon reported by desert travelers. Nomadic peoples describe sands that sing without any apparent disturbance, voices that emerge during perfectly still nights when no wind moves across the dunes. Some accounts speak of musical patterns that seem too complex and structured to result from random grain movement, as if the desert were performing compositions of impossible beauty and sophistication. Ancient Chinese texts describe the singing sands of the Taklamakan Desert as a form of celestial communication, believing that the sounds conveyed messages from divine beings to those pure enough of heart to understand their meaning. Taoist hermits would journey into the desert specifically to listen to these sand songs, using them as aids to meditation and spiritual development. Some texts suggest that masters could interpret the sounds as actual language, receiving guidance and wisdom from the desert's voice. The singing sands of the Sahara present their own mysteries. Tuareg guides speak of specific dunes that sing only at certain times of year, their voices coinciding with astronomical events or seasonal changes. These nomadic peoples have developed elaborate oral traditions that connect the sand songs to creation myths, ancestral spirits, and prophecies about future events. The precision with which they can predict when and where the sands will sing suggests knowledge systems that integrate acoustic phenomena with astronomical and meteorological observations. Recent acoustic analysis of singing sands has revealed unexpected complexity in the sounds they produce. High-resolution recordings show harmonic structures that include fundamental frequencies and overtones, arranged in patterns that sometimes approximate musical scales. Some researchers have detected what appear to be rhythmic elements, suggesting that the acoustic phenomena may be more structured than random physical processes would typically produce. The geographical distribution of singing sands follows patterns that may relate to ancient trade routes and settlement patterns. Many of the most renowned singing sand locations lie along historical paths of human migration and commerce, raising questions about whether ancient people specifically sought out these acoustic environments or Whether the locations became important precisely because of their unusual properties, archaeological investigations around singing sand sites have revealed evidence of human activity spanning millennia. Artifacts found buried in and around musical dunes suggest that these locations served as landmarks, gathering places, or sites of spiritual significance for successive cultures. The persistence of human presence at these acoustically active locations implies that the sand songs played important roles in navigation, ritual practice, or cultural memory. Modern technology has enabled detailed analysis of the conditions required for sand singing, but this scientific understanding has paradoxically revealed how remarkable it is that such phenomena occur at all. The precision required in grain characteristics, environmental conditions, and mechanical disturbance suggests that singing sands represent an almost impossibly delicate balance of physical factors that can be disrupted by even minor changes in climate or human activity. Where sand sings its ancient songs, water whispers different secrets. Along the southeastern coast of India, where the Bay of Bengal meets shores sacred to generations of pilgrims, the ancient port city of Mahabalipuram has guarded secrets beneath its waves for more than a millennium. Local fishermen have long spoken of structures visible in clear water during low tide, stone foundations and carved pillars that hint at a submerged city far more extensive than the famous shore temple that stands sentinel above the waterline. The devastating tsunami of December 2004, while bringing unprecedented destruction, also revealed archaeological treasures that confirmed the truth behind centuries of maritime legend. The folklore of Tamil fishermen speaks of 7 pagodas, magnificent temples that once lined the coast in a display of architectural grandeur that attracted merchants and pilgrims from across the Indian Ocean. According to these oral traditions, 6 of the 7 temples sank beneath the waves due to divine displeasure or natural catastrophe, leaving only the surviving shore temple as a weathered monument to vanished glory. These stories, dismissed by colonial archaeologists as mere superstition, have gained new credibility through underwater discoveries that reveal the sophisticated reality behind the legends. The tsunami's massive waves, while devastating to modern communities, acted as an inadvertent archaeological tool, stripping away centuries of sediment accumulation and revealing stone structures that had been hidden beneath sand and silt. In the hours following the disaster, local residents reported seeing carved elephants, lions, and other stone sculptures emerging from the receding waters. Archaeological teams rushing to document these temporary exposures confirmed the presence of worked stone foundations, carved pillars, and sculptural elements that bore the characteristic style of Pallava dynasty artisans, systematic underwater. Excavation has revealed a submerged landscape of remarkable complexity and sophistication. Stone platforms, stairways, and foundation walls extend far beyond the visible shore temple, creating what appears to be a vast temple complex that once covered several acres of coastal terrain. The craftsmanship evident in the underwater remains matches the finest examples of Pallava sculpture, with intricate carvings that have survived submersion in surprisingly good condition. The architectural style of the submerged structures dates to the 7th and 8th centuries CE, coinciding with the golden age of Pallava power when Mahabalipuram served as a major port connecting South India with Southeast Asian kingdoms. The scale of the underwater complex suggests that this was not merely a religious center, but a comprehensive urban environment that supported substantial populations of priests, artisans, merchants, and pilgrims. Carbon dating of organic materials found within the underwater structures has yielded dates ranging from 1,500 to 1,200 years ago, confirming that the submersion occurred during the medieval period rather than in prehistoric times. This timeline corresponds with historical accounts of severe storms and coastal changes that affected the region during the later Pallava period. suggesting that natural disasters rather than gradual sea level rise caused the temple's submersion. The preservation of carved details underwater challenges assumptions about the durability of stone architecture in marine environments. Many of the submerged sculptures retain crisp edges and fine details that would typically be eroded by centuries of wave action and saltwater exposure. This exceptional preservation may result from protective sand coverings that shielded the carvings from direct wave impact, or from specific qualities of the granite used in construction that resist marine weathering. Recent discoveries include what appears to be a large step tank or reservoir, similar to the famous temple tanks found at other South Indian religious complexes. The presence of such sophisticated water management infrastructure underwater suggests that the original temple complex incorporated hydraulic engineering designed to integrate with both terrestrial and marine environments, perhaps serving ritual functions related to the sacred meeting of fresh and salt water. The submerged city extends far beyond the immediate vicinity of the shore temple, with underwater surveys detecting structural remains scattered across several square kilometers of seafloor. Ground-penetrating sonar has identified geometric anomalies that may represent additional temple foundations, suggesting that Mahabalipuram's golden age encompassed a much larger urban area than previously recognized. These discoveries support historical accounts, describing the port as one of the most important commercial centers on India's eastern coast. The cultural implications of Mahabalipuram's underwater heritage extend beyond archaeology to encompass broader questions about the relationship between human civilization and environmental change. The submersion of major religious and commercial centers demonstrates the vulnerability of coastal communities to natural disasters, while the preservation of architectural heritage beneath the waves illustrates the potential for underwater archaeology to recover lost chapters of human history. Local communities have developed deep connections to the submerged heritage, with fishing families passing down knowledge of underwater landmarks across generations. These traditional knowledge systems enable fishermen to navigate using submerged structures as reference points, creating living links between contemporary maritime culture and ancient urban planning. The integration of oral tradition with archaeological discovery exemplifies the potential for community knowledge to guide scientific investigation. The theological significance of the submerged temples continues to influence contemporary religious practice. Many devotees believe that the underwater structures remain spiritually active, conducting rituals on the beach that acknowledge the presence of sacred spaces beneath the waves. This ongoing reverence demonstrates the persistence of religious traditions even when their physical foundations have been transformed by natural forces. The mystery of Mahabalipuram's 7 pagodas illuminates the complex relationships between human achievement, environmental change, and cultural memory. The temples beneath the waves serve as both archaeological treasure and spiritual metaphor, representing the eternal tension between human desire for permanence and the dynamic forces that continuously reshape Earth's surface. Beneath waves, stone prayers echo through liquid cathedrals of time. In the fertile plains where the ancient Indus River once flowed through, landscapes now divided between Pakistan and northwestern India, there flourished a civilization whose sophistication rivaled that of contemporary Egypt and Mesopotamia, yet whose very thoughts remain locked away behind an impenetrable wall of silence. The Harappan people, as archaeologists have named them, left behind cities of extraordinary urban planning, artifacts of remarkable craftsmanship, and thousands upon thousands of inscribed seals and tablets bearing symbols that constitute one of humanity's most tantalizing undeciphered scripts. The Indus Valley script presents a linguistic enigma that has confounded scholars for nearly a century since its discovery. Unlike the pictographic origins of Egyptian hieroglyphs or the wedge-shaped marks of Sumerian cuneiform, The Harappan symbols display a unique character that seems to represent a fully developed writing system that emerged without apparent precedent or evolutionary development from simpler forms. The symbols themselves, numbering over 400 distinct signs, combine geometric precision with organic curves that suggest both mathematical sophistication and artistic sensibility. What makes the script particularly mystifying is the brevity of most inscriptions. The vast majority of Harappan texts contain only 5 or 6 symbols, far too short to provide the linguistic redundancy that typically enables decipherment efforts. Longer inscriptions are extraordinarily rare, with the longest known example containing merely 26 symbols. This peculiar distribution suggests either a highly efficient writing system capable of expressing complex concepts in minimal space, or a script used primarily for specific purposes that required only brief notations. The cultural context surrounding the script's use deepens its mystery. Harappan civilization flourished from approximately 2600 to 1900 BCE, controlling territory larger than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, with cities that demonstrated unprecedented standardization across vast distances. The same weights and measures, the same brick sizes, the same urban planning principles appear from the Arabian seacoast to the foothills of the Himalayas. Such uniformity implies administrative systems of remarkable sophistication, yet no royal inscriptions, no historical narratives, no religious texts have been definitively identified among the surviving materials. Recent computational analysis has revealed intriguing patterns within the script that suggest genuine linguistic content rather than simple pictographic symbols or decorative motifs. Statistical studies of symbol frequencies, positional distributions, and sequential patterns indicate that the Harappan script exhibits properties consistent with natural languages, including syntactic structures and probable grammatical relationships. These findings support the interpretation that the symbols represent a true writing system rather than a collection of logographic markers. The geographical distribution of inscribed materials reveals a writing tradition that extended across the entire Harappan cultural sphere. Identical symbols appear on seals from Harappa in the Punjab, Mohenjo-Daro in Sindh, and Dholavira in Gujarat, suggesting either a unified language across the civilization or a standardized script that could represent multiple languages. The consistency of symbol forms across such vast distances implies institutional control over literacy and standardized training for scribes. Attempts to connect the Harappan script with known language families have yielded tantalizing but inconclusive results. Some researchers propose relationships with Dravidian languages still spoken in South India, while others suggest connections to Indo-European, Sino-Tibetan, or even isolated language families. The lack of bilingual texts or clear pictographic elements makes these linguistic identifications largely speculative, though certain structural patterns do seem to echo features found in various Asian language groups. The technological sophistication evident in Harappan craftsmanship suggests a society capable of developing and maintaining complex information systems. Their standardized weights and measures, their precise bronze working, their advanced hydraulic engineering, and their long-distance trade networks all indicate organizational capabilities that would require sophisticated record-keeping and communication systems. The writing system must have served these practical needs while possibly encompassing religious, legal, or artistic functions that remain hidden behind the veil of undecipherment. Recent discoveries of Harappan materials at sites throughout the Middle East and Central Asia have revealed the extent of their commercial networks and cultural influence. Indus Valley seals have been found in Mesopotamian cities, while Harappan-style artifacts appear in locations as distant as Central Asian oasis towns and Persian Gulf ports. These findings suggest that the Harappan script may have served as a medium for international communication, potentially preserving records of trade agreements, diplomatic correspondence, or cultural exchanges that shaped the ancient world. The sudden disappearance of Harappan civilization around 1900 BCE coincided with the complete abandonment of their writing system. Unlike other ancient scripts that evolved into later forms or influenced subsequent writing traditions, the Harappan symbols simply vanished from the archaeological record without apparent successors. This abrupt termination suggests either catastrophic disruption of the civilization or a deliberate abandonment of urban culture that rendered literacy unnecessary or impossible to maintain. Environmental factors may have contributed to both the civilization's rise and its mysterious conclusion. The Indus River system, which provided the agricultural foundation for Harappan prosperity, experienced significant changes during the second millennium BCE. Climate shifts, tectonic activity, and river course changes could have undermined the agricultural surpluses that supported urban populations and the specialist classes responsible for maintaining literacy traditions. The persistent silence of the Harappan script represents more than an archaeological puzzle. It embodies the fragility of human communication across time and the profound losses that can occur when civilizations disappear. Somewhere within those undeciphered symbols lie the thoughts, dreams, fears, and aspirations of people who lived and died 4,000 years ago, their voices trapped in mineral permanence, yet remaining as distant as stars. Where written words fail, the landscape itself becomes the text. Across the parched plateaus of southern Peru, where the Atacama Desert stretches its fingers toward the Pacific, an ancient civilization inscribed messages of staggering scale and precision into the very skin of the planet. The Nazca lines, geometric forms, animal figures, and abstract designs that can only be fully comprehended from aerial perspectives transform hundreds of square kilometers of desert into a vast manuscript written in a language that continues to elude complete translation despite 7 decades of intensive study. The lines themselves constitute a technological achievement that challenges conventional understanding of pre-Columbian capabilities. Created between 500 BCE and 500 CE by the Nazca culture, these geoglyphs demonstrate mathematical precision that rivals modern surveying techniques. The Nazca spider, stretching nearly 150 feet across the desert floor, maintains perfect proportional relationships that remain accurate even when viewed from aircraft flying at considerable altitude. The geometric patterns include trapezoids covering areas equivalent to several city blocks, their edges straight as laser beams, across terrain that offers no natural reference points for such accuracy. What transforms these earthworks from impressive art into profound mystery is their relationship with perspective and visibility. Many of the most complex figures can only be recognized as coherent images from altitudes of several hundred feet or more. The Nazca people, who possess no known flying technology, created artworks that seem designed for viewers capable of aerial observation. This paradox has generated theories ranging from ancient astronomical observatories to landing strips for extraterrestrial visitors. No more nuanced interpretations focus on the spiritual and ceremonial functions of large-scale landscape modification. Recent archaeological investigation has revealed that the lines were not created in isolation, but formed part of a comprehensive ritual landscape that integrated water management, astronomical observation, and religious ceremony. Many geoglyphs align with underground water sources, suggesting that their creation was connected to the vital but unpredictable water resources of this arid environment. The lines may have served as pathways for ceremonial processions designed to invoke rainfall or honor the mountain spirits believed to control water flow. The construction techniques employed by the Nazca artists demonstrate sophisticated understanding of desert preservation and landscape stability. The lines were created by removing the dark, oxidized surface stones to reveal the lighter-colored soil beneath, creating contrasts that have remained visible for over 15 centuries. The selection of locations, the methods of stone removal, and the techniques for maintaining linear precision across miles of undulating terrain all indicate systematic approaches to large-scale Earth modification that required both technical knowledge and social organization. Astronomical alignments provide another layer of meaning within the Nazca complex. Many lines point toward the rising or setting positions of significant celestial bodies, particularly during solstices and equinoxes. The geometric patterns may function as massive calendrical instruments, enabling precise tracking of seasonal changes crucial for agricultural planning in an environment where timing of planting and harvesting could determine survival or starvation. The aerial perspective required to appreciate the lines' full meaning has led to speculation about Nazca ceremonial practices and spiritual technologies. Some researchers propose that the Nazca people developed forms of trance, flying, or out-of-body experiences that enabled shamanic consciousness to rise above the landscape and perceive the patterns from elevated viewpoints. This interpretation aligns with evidence of hallucinogenic plant use in Nazca burial sites and the presence of trophy heads that may relate to consciousness-altering ritual practices. The longevity of the lines themselves speaks to both environmental conditions and intentional maintenance. The Atacama Desert's extreme aridity has preserved the geoglyphs with minimal degradation, while evidence suggests that local populations continue to maintain and possibly extend the lines for centuries after their initial creation. This multi-generational commitment implies that the lines served ongoing cultural functions rather than representing single ceremonial events or artistic projects. Modern satellite imagery and computer analysis have revealed the true extent of the Nazca phenomenon. Beyond the famous animal figures and geometric patterns visible to early aerial observers, researchers have identified thousands of additional lines, many forming networks that connect distant parts of the plateau. The total area affected by Nazca Earth modification may encompass over 1,000 square kilometers, making it one of the largest artistic undertakings in human history. The integration of the lines with the broader Nazca cultural landscape demonstrates sophisticated environmental management adapted to desert conditions. The civilization developed underground aqueduct systems called pukios that channeled mountain water across miles of underground channels to agricultural areas. The maintenance of these water systems required precise knowledge of underground geology and hydrological principles, suggesting that the Nazca possessed technical capabilities that extended far beyond artistic expression. Recent discoveries of similar but smaller geoglyphs in other parts of South America indicate that large-scale landscape modification was more widespread among pre-Columbian cultures than previously recognized. These findings suggest that the Nazca lines represent the most elaborate expression of a broader tradition of earth art that may have served similar functions in different environmental and cultural contexts. The enduring power of the Nazca lines lies not merely in their scale or precision, but in their transformation of landscape into language. These desert inscriptions speak of human desire to communicate across time and space, to embed meaning in the earth itself, and to create art that transcends the limitations of human perspective. They remind us that consciousness, given sufficient motivation and organization, can reshape the very ground beneath our feet into vehicles for messages we may never fully understand. From earthbound messages, consciousness turns toward the infinite. Beneath the otherworldly landscape of central Anatolia, where volcanic eruptions sculpted fairy chimneys and wind-carved valleys into formations that seem borrowed from distant planets, lies one of humanity's most extraordinary achievements in Subterranean architecture. The underground cities of Cappadocia, carved from soft volcanic tuff over millennia of patient excavation, create alternate realities where entire civilizations could disappear into the earth itself, emerging only when surface conditions permitted their return to the light. The scale of these excavations defies comprehension. The Ringku, the largest discovered complex, descends 18 levels into the earth, reaching depths of nearly 300 feet below the surface. Its passages and chambers could accommodate up to 20,000 inhabitants along with their livestock, food stores, and essential equipment for extended periods of subterranean existence. The engineering required to create stable underground spaces of such magnitude, while maintaining adequate ventilation and preventing structural collapse, demonstrates technical capabilities that challenge assumptions about ancient construction methods. What transforms these underground cities from impressive engineering achievements into profound mysteries is their integration of practical survival needs with symbolic and possibly cosmic elements. The layouts of many chambers follow patterns that correspond to celestial configurations, with room arrangements that mirror constellation patterns visible in the night sky above Cappadocia. Some researchers propose that the underground cities were designed as terrestrial reflections of celestial order, creating sacred spaces where inhabitants could maintain connection with cosmic forces, even while hidden from the surface world. The ventilation systems represent perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of underground city engineering. Shafts extending from the deepest levels to the surface provide fresh air circulation that maintains breathable conditions throughout the complex network of tunnels and chambers. These ventilation channels were designed with remarkable precision, incorporating bends and barriers that prevent surface water infiltration while ensuring optimal airflow. The acoustic properties of the shafts also enabled communication between different levels, creating internal communication networks that functioned without mechanical amplification. Archaeological evidence suggests that the underground cities served multiple functions across different historical periods. While popular imagination focuses on their use as hiding places during times of conflict, the elaborate infrastructure and permanent installations indicate that these subterranean environments supported ongoing communities rather than temporary refuges. Workshops, storage areas, communal kitchens, and religious spaces suggest that substantial populations lived underground for extended periods as part of normal cultural practice rather than emergency survival. The religious and ceremonial spaces within the underground cities reveal spiritual dimensions that transcend mere survival functions. Churches carved from living rock display sophisticated architectural elements including domes, arches, and decorative reliefs that demonstrate artistic traditions adapted to subterranean conditions. The positioning of these sacred spaces within the overall complex layouts suggests that religious observance was central to underground community life, rather than an afterthought added to utilitarian tunnels. Recent discoveries using ground-penetrating radar and laser scanning technology have revealed that the known underground cities represent only a fraction of the total subterranean development in Cappadocia. Surveys indicate extensive tunnel networks connecting different city complexes, creating underground transportation systems that enable movement across considerable distances without surface exposure. The total volume of excavated material removed from these underground spaces may equal that of the largest pyramid constructions, representing one of humanity's most extensive earth-moving projects. The precision of underground city construction demonstrates mathematical and engineering knowledge that enabled three-dimensional planning of unprecedented complexity. The excavators needed to maintain structural integrity while creating maximum usable space, requiring sophisticated understanding of rock mechanics and load distribution. The consistent temperatures maintained in the deepest levels, regardless of surface weather conditions, suggest knowledge of geothermal principles that provided natural climate control for underground communities. The social organization required to conceive, plan, and execute such massive underground construction projects implies cultural institutions of remarkable stability and authority. The coordination of thousands of workers across multiple generations, the management of excavated materials, and the maintenance of quality standards throughout vast underground spaces all required administrative capabilities that challenge conventional models of ancient social organization. The symbolic dimensions of underground city construction may reflect cosmological beliefs that viewed the Earth as a living entity with its own internal spaces and energies. Many ancient cultures understood caves and underground chambers as portals to other realms, places where the boundaries between ordinary reality and spiritual dimensions became permeable. The Cappadocian cities might represent attempts to create artificial cave systems that facilitated access to these alternate states of consciousness or being. The preservation of underground cities across centuries of abandonment and rediscovery demonstrates both the durability of their construction and the stability of the geological environment. Unlike surface structures vulnerable to weather, warfare, and natural disasters, the underground spaces maintained their integrity through periods when surface communities disappeared entirely from the historical record. This preservation enabled the cities to serve as time capsules, maintaining evidence of ancient life ways that would otherwise have been lost. The enduring fascination with Cappadocia's underground cities reflects deeper human relationships with interior spaces and hidden dimensions. These subterranean worlds speak to psychological and spiritual needs that extend beyond physical survival, suggesting that human consciousness requires not only external horizons, but also internal depths, where meaning can be discovered through descent rather than ascent. In depths where light has never touched stone, other darknesses hold different secrets. In the granite caves and sandstone shelters scattered across the Kalahari Desert, where the last free Bushmen once gathered around fires that have burned for 30,000 years, there exists an artistic tradition that may represent humanity's oldest continuous exploration of consciousness itself. The rock art of the Sand People, painted and engraved across thousands of sites throughout southern Africa, depicts not merely the physical world of animals and hunting scenes, but the invisible landscapes of trance, transformation, and spiritual travel that emerge when human awareness transcends its ordinary boundaries. The sand artists, working with pigments derived from iron oxides, plant extracts, and animal blood, created images that blurred the distinction between naturalistic observation and visionary experience. Their paintings show animals that seem to flow and transform, human figures that merge with antelope or dance in impossible positions, and geometric patterns that pulse with energy, suggesting states of consciousness far removed from everyday awareness. These images, carbon dated to periods spanning from 27,000 years ago to the colonial period, constitute a visual record of humanity's earliest systematic investigation of altered states. The centerpiece of sand rock art is the trance dance, depicted in countless variations across the archaeological record. These paintings show groups of people in intense physical movement, often with lines of force or energy radiating from their bodies, sometimes with blood flowing from their noses, a physiological effect documented in contemporary sand trance dancing. The consistency of these depictions across vast distances and time periods suggests that the sand developed sophisticated understanding of the neurological and psychological processes involved in Vasquez consciousness alteration. Recent neuropsychological research has revealed that the geometric patterns frequently appearing in sand rock art correspond precisely to entoptic phenomena, visual effects produced by the human nervous system itself during altered states of consciousness. These patterns, including grids, spirals, zigzags, and nested curves, appear identical across cultures and throughout history whenever humans enter trance states through meditation, sensory deprivation, rhythmic stimulation, or chemical means. The sand artists were apparently mapping the basic architecture of human consciousness itself. The transformation figures that populate sand rock art provide windows into spiritual beliefs that understood the boundaries between human and animal. Consciousness as permeable and navigable. Paintings show shamans with antelope hooves, people growing wings, or figures half human and half eland, the large antelope that held special significance in sand cosmology. These images likely represent not literal metamorphosis but spiritual travel in which consciousness adopts non-human perspectives and abilities. The sophisticated understanding of trance states evident in sand art suggests that these peoples developed what might be called technologies of consciousness systematic, methods for inducing and controlling altered states for specific purposes. Ethnographic studies of surviving sand groups have documented trance dancing traditions that combine rhythmic movement, hyperventilation, intense concentration, and communal energy to facilitate healing, divination, and spiritual communication with deceased ancestors and animal spirits. The geographic distribution of sand rock art reveals a cultural tradition that maintained remarkable consistency across the entire southern African subcontinent. From the Drakensberg Mountains to the Namib Desert, the same artistic conventions, symbolic systems, and apparent spiritual practices appear in rock shelters separated by thousands of miles. This consistency suggests either extraordinary cultural communication networks or shared neurological experiences that produced similar artistic expressions independently. The layering of paintings at many sites indicates that certain locations served as sacred galleries for countless generations. New images were painted over older ones in palimpsests of spiritual activity that accumulated over millennia. The selection of particular caves and rock faces for repeated artistic use may relate to acoustic properties, geological features, or environmental conditions that enhance the consciousness-altering experiences associated with the art's creation. Recent analysis using advanced imaging techniques has revealed previously invisible details in sand rock art, including paintings that appear only under certain lighting conditions or spectral analysis. Some images seem designed to become visible only when viewed in firelight or during specific times of day, suggesting that the art functioned as part of temporal rituals that integrated visual experience with environmental cycles and states of consciousness. The relationship between sand rock art and the landscape reveals sophisticated understanding of how environmental factors influence consciousness and perception. Many painting sites are located in caves with unusual acoustic properties that amplify sound and create echo effects during singing or rhythmic activity. Others are positioned to take advantage of natural light patterns that would enhance the visual impact of the painted images during ritual activities. The colonial period brought devastating disruption to sand cultural traditions as European settlers and African farmers displaced hunter-gatherer communities from their ancestral territories. The knowledge systems that created and interpreted the rock art were largely lost as traditional ways of life became impossible to maintain. Contemporary sand communities retain fragments of this tradition, but the complete symbolic vocabulary and ritual context of the ancient art remains partially mysterious. Modern neuroscience has confirmed many insights about consciousness that seem implicit in sand rock art. The recognition that human perception involves active construction rather than passive reception, that the boundaries of self are more fluid than commonly assumed, and that consciousness can access states radically different from ordinary waking awareness, all find expression in paintings created tens of thousands of years before these concepts entered academic discourse. Consciousness expands beyond individual minds into collective mysteries. in the intricate dance between mind and reality, where individual consciousness meets the vast networks of collective understanding, there emerges a phenomenon that challenges the mechanistic foundations of modern science while illuminating mysteries that have puzzled humanity since the dawn of self-awareness. The simultaneous appearance of identical innovations across separated cultures and continents suggests that knowledge itself may possess properties that transcend the boundaries of space, time, and individual minds, flowing through channels that conventional science has yet to acknowledge or understand. Throughout history, the pattern repeats with startling consistency. Complex discoveries and innovations appearing simultaneously in locations that had no known contact with each other. The mathematical concept of calculus emerged independently in the minds of Newton in England and Leibniz in Germany within the same decade. The telegraph was invented by multiple individuals across different continents in the 1830s and 1840s. Photography, the bicycle, and the theory of evolution by natural selection all manifested through multiple independent discoverers working in isolation from each other, as if these ideas existed in some realm of potential, waiting for the right moment and circumstances to crystallize into human awareness. The British biologist Rupert Sheldrake proposed that these patterns might result from what he termed morphic resonance, the hypothesis that natural systems inherit collective memory from previous similar systems through non-material connections that operate across space and time. According to this theory, when any system learns or develops a new pattern of organization, this pattern becomes easier for subsequent similar systems to adopt, even without direct physical contact or communication between them. Laboratory experiments investigating morphic resonance have yielded intriguing but controversial results. Studies of crystal formation have shown that new chemical compounds crystallize more readily after they have been synthesized elsewhere in the world, even when prepared under identical conditions in isolated laboratories. Behavioral experiments with animals have suggested that learning in one population can facilitate similar learning in genetically similar but geographically separate populations, implying information transfer through mechanisms unknown to conventional biology. The implications of morphic fields extend far beyond individual discoveries to encompass the evolution of entire knowledge systems and cultural practices. The emergence of agriculture, metallurgy, writing, and complex mathematical concepts across multiple civilizations during similar time periods might reflect the operation of collective learning processes that operate at species rather than individual levels. Human consciousness, rather than being confined to individual brains, might participate in larger fields of information and understanding that connect all minds across space and time. Ancient wisdom traditions have long recognized phenomena that resemble morphic resonance. Hindu concepts of Akashic records describe universal memory fields that store all knowledge and experience, accessible to consciousness that achieves appropriate states of awareness. Buddhist understanding of interdependence suggests that all phenomena arise through networks of mutual causation that transcend apparent separations between individual entities. Indigenous cultures worldwide speak of knowledge that comes through dreams, visions, and spiritual practices that connect individual minds to collective sources of wisdom. The technological revolution of the 21st century has created new contexts of observing morphic phenomena. The rapid spread of social movements, fashion trends, and cultural memes across global communication networks demonstrates how information and behavioral patterns can propagate through populations with speeds and mechanisms that exceed conventional understanding of learning and cultural transmission. The synchronization of human behavior across vast distances through digital networks may represent artificial amplification of natural morphic processes. Quantum physics provides Potential theoretical frameworks for understanding non-local information. Transfer between separated systems. Quantum entanglement demonstrates that particles can maintain instantaneous correlations across arbitrary distances, suggesting that the fundamental structure of reality includes non-local connections that operate outside conventional space-time limitations. Some researchers propose that consciousness itself may involve quantum processes that enable minds to access information fields, extending beyond individual neural networks. The study of collective animal behavior reveals patterns that seem to transcend explanation through simple instinct or learned responses. Bird flocks and fish schools display coordination that appears to involve instantaneous information sharing across large groups, while migratory species navigate using knowledge that seems to exceed what individual animals could acquire through direct experience. These phenomena suggest that collective intelligence emerges through mechanisms that current biology cannot fully explain. The morphic field hypothesis raises profound questions about the nature of creativity, learning, and human potential. If individual minds participate in larger fields of knowledge and understanding, then education, scientific research, and artistic creation might be reconceptualized as processes of accessing and contributing to collective intelligence rather than merely individual achievement. The boundaries between self and environment, between interior and exterior knowledge, become permeable and dynamic rather than fixed and absolute. Contemporary neuroscience has revealed that human brains exhibit properties that align with morphic field concepts. Neural networks demonstrate emergent behaviors that exceed the sum of their components, while brain plasticity enables continuous reorganization in response to experience and environmental demands. The discovery of mirror neurons, which activate both when performing actions and when observing others perform the same actions, suggests biological mechanisms for sharing knowledge and experience between individuals. The validation or refutation of morphic field theory may require new experimental approaches that can detect subtle informational connections between separated systems. Such research would need to account for variables that conventional science typically ignores: the intentions and expectations of experimenters, the cultural and historical context of investigations, and the possibility that consciousness itself influences the outcomes of observations. Where thoughts leap across impossible distances, time itself becomes fluid. Within the quantum fabric of space-time, where consciousness intersects with the fundamental forces that govern reality's deepest structures, certain locations on Earth seem to exist as nexus points where the normal flow of temporal experience becomes malleable, stretched, and occasionally inverted. These sacred sites, marked by megalithic monuments, ancient temples, and naturally occurring geological formations, create pockets of altered temporality that suggest the universe possesses mechanisms for consciousness to transcend the linear progression of causality that defines ordinary existence. At Newgrange in Ireland, where Neolithic architects aligned their monument with exquisite precision to capture the winter solstice sunrise, visitors report temporal distortions that extend far beyond the astronomical phenomena the structure was designed to frame. The narrow passage that leads to the inner chamber creates a sensory environment of profound isolation, complete darkness, muffled sound, and air that carries the mineralized breath of 5,000 years. Within this womb of stone, time seems to lose its tyrannical grip on consciousness, allowing perception to expand into states where past, present, and future collapse into a singular eternal moment. The psychological effects documented at such sites reveal patterns that suggest genuine alterations in temporal perception rather than mere subjective impressions of time passage. Electroencephalographic studies of individuals experiencing these phenomena show brainwave patterns characteristic of deep meditative states, with synchronized gamma oscillations that correlate with reported experiences of time dilation or compression. The neural signatures resemble those observed in advanced meditation practitioners who describe accessing timeless awareness during profound contemplative absorption. Geological analysis of sacred sites has revealed unexpected correlations between reported temporal anomalies and specific geophysical characteristics. Many locations exhibiting temporal effects sit atop underground water systems, mineral deposits with unusual magnetic properties, or intersections of geological fault lines that create subtle electromagnetic field variations. The Earth's magnetic field, generated by the movement of molten iron in the planet's core, exhibits local variations that can influence the operation of biological systems, including the delicate electromagnetic processes within human neural networks. The precision with which ancient architects selected and modified these locations suggests sophisticated understanding of the relationship between environmental conditions and consciousness states. The acoustic properties of stone circles, like those at Avebury, create resonance frequencies that match brainwave patterns associated with altered states of awareness. When combined with the visual effects of carefully positioned megaliths that frame celestial movements, these sites function as consciousness-altering technologies that facilitate direct experience of temporal transcendence. Recent research in quantum biology has revealed that biological systems, including the human brain, operate using quantum mechanical processes that were previously thought to be too delicate to survive in warm, noisy biological environments. Quantum coherence effects in microtubules within neurons may provide the physical mechanisms through which consciousness interfaces with the fundamental structure of spacetime itself. If consciousness participates in quantum processes, then environments that influence these processes could theoretically affect temporal perception at the most basic levels. The phenomenology of temporal anomalies at sacred sites follows patterns that align with theoretical physics' understanding of time's malleable nature. Einstein's relativity demonstrated that time is not absolute but depends on the observer's frame of reference, varying with gravitational fields and relative motion. While the gravitational effects at Earth's surface are generally too weak to produce noticeable time dilation, consciousness may possess sensitivity to temporal variations that exceed the detection limits of mechanical instruments. Indigenous traditions worldwide describe sacred places as locations where the ancestors remain present, where the boundaries between different temporal realms become permeable, and where individual consciousness can access memories and knowledge from other times. These descriptions align remarkably with quantum field theories that suggest all temporal states may exist simultaneously within the quantum vacuum, accessible to consciousness under appropriate conditions of reduced environmental interference. And heightened awareness that the construction of sacred sites often involved modification of natural formations in ways that enhance their consciousness-altering properties. The addition of stone circles, the excavation of chambers, and the precise orientation of passages were not merely architectural choices, but technological innovations designed to amplify subtle environmental effects on human awareness. These ancient engineers possessed empirical knowledge of consciousness matter, interactions that modern science is only beginning to investigate. The experience of temporal transcendence at sacred sites often involves profound shifts in identity and awareness that extend far beyond mere time perception. Individuals report feeling connected to vast networks of consciousness that encompass not only other human minds, but the living awareness of the Earth itself. These experiences suggest that temporal anomalies may represent windows into broader dimensional realities where consciousness operates according to principles that transcend the limitations of individual embodiment. modern neuroscience has identified brain regions associated with temporal perception, including the suprachiasmatic nucleus that regulates circadian rhythms and cortical areas that process sequential experience. Magnetic stimulation of these regions can produce dramatic alterations in time perception, supporting the hypothesis that environmental electromagnetic fields could naturally influence temporal awareness under specific conditions. Sacred sites may represent locations where natural fields achieve the precise characteristics needed to trigger these neurological responses. The implications of temporal anomalies at sacred sites extend beyond psychology and neuroscience to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of reality itself. If consciousness can genuinely access non-linear temporal states under certain conditions, this suggests that the universe possesses informational structures that transcend the apparent flow of cause and effect that governs material processes. The intersection of matter and consciousness, reality reveals its malleable nature. In the luminous gardens of ancient wisdom, where philosopher-scientists of antiquity contemplated the fundamental nature of reality through pure reasoning and contemplative insight, there emerged understanding that parallels with startling precision the most advanced discoveries of 21st century quantum physics. These convergences between ancient metaphysics and modern science suggest either remarkable coincidence or the possibility that consciousness, when properly trained and focused, can access truths about reality's deepest structures that transcend the technological limitations of any particular historical epoch. The Vedantic tradition of ancient India, flowering in the centuries before the Common Era, developed concepts of reality that anticipate quantum mechanical principles with uncanny accuracy. The Sanskrit term Maya describes apparent reality as a dynamic interplay of consciousness and probability waves, where solid matter dissolves upon examination into patterns of information and potential rather than discrete particles with definite properties. This understanding predates by millennia Werner Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and Niels Bohr's complementarity theorem, yet captures their essential insights with poetic precision. The Buddhist philosopher Nagarjuna, working in the 2nd century CE, articulated a theory of dependent origination that mirrors quantum field theory's description of reality as consisting entirely of relationships and interactions rather than independent entities. His logical analysis demonstrated that no phenomenon possesses inherent existence apart from its connections with all other phenomena, a high conclusion that quantum entanglement experiments have confirmed through mathematical precision and technological demonstration. The interdependence that Nagarjuna discovered through contemplative reasoning appears identical to the non-local correlations that quantum physics describes as fundamental features of the universe. Ancient Greek atomists, particularly Democritus and his followers, proposed that reality consists of indivisible particles moving through void space, a model that seems crude compared to quantum field theory until one examines their more subtle insights. They suggested that atoms possess properties that only manifest through interaction with observation. That empty space contains hidden potentials that can give rise to matter, and that the fundamental particles of reality are more like mathematical principles than physical objects. These concepts align remarkably with quantum mechanical descriptions of virtual particles, quantum vacuum fluctuations, and the role of measurement in determining physical properties. The Chinese philosophical tradition developed parallel insights through different methodological approaches. The I Ching, or Book of Changes, describes reality as consisting of complementary opposites that exist in dynamic tension, where apparent contradictions resolve into higher-order harmonies. This dialectical understanding predates by centuries the wave-particle duality that forms the foundation of quantum mechanics. while the hexagram system that maps all possible combinations of yin and yang resonates with quantum state space mathematics and probability theory. Consciousness plays a central role in both ancient philosophy and quantum mechanics, though modern physics often attempts to minimize this connection through various interpretational strategies. The ancient traditions explicitly recognized consciousness as fundamental to reality structure, proposing that awareness and matter represent different aspects of a unified field rather than separate substances that somehow interact. The measurement problem in quantum mechanics, the question of how definite outcomes emerge from quantum superpositions, finds resolution in interpretations that grant consciousness a fundamental role in the collapse of wave functions. The precision with which ancient philosophers intuited quantum-like principles suggests methodologies for accessing knowledge that conventional science has largely abandoned. Contemplative practices involving sustained meditation, logical analysis, and direct introspection apparently enabled these thinkers to discern aspects of reality structure that technological investigation has confirmed only recently. The convergence implies that consciousness possesses capacities for direct knowledge that transcend sensory experience and conceptual reasoning. Contemporary research in consciousness studies has begun to explore the possibility that meditative states can provide access to information about physical reality that exceeds what ordinary perception and reasoning can achieve. Studies of advanced meditation practitioners reveal brain states characterized by coherent electromagnetic activity, enhanced neural connectivity, and access to intuitive insights that demonstrate remarkable accuracy when subjected to verification. These findings suggest that the ancient philosophers may have been conducting empirical research using consciousness itself as both instrument and laboratory. The mathematical structures underlying quantum mechanics, Hilbert spaces, operator algebras, and symmetry groups find expression in ancient geometrical and numerical traditions that were often considered pure. In the luminous gardens of ancient wisdom, where philosopher-scientists of antiquity contemplated the fundamental nature of reality through pure reasoning and contemplative insight, there emerged understanding that parallels with startling precision the most advanced discoveries of 21st century quantum physics. These convergences between ancient metaphysics and modern science suggest either remarkable coincidence or the possibility that consciousness, when properly trained and focused, can access truths about reality's deepest structures that transcend the technological limitations of any particular historical epoch. The Vedantic tradition of ancient India, flowering in the centuries before the Common Era, developed concepts of reality that anticipate quantum mechanical principles with uncanny accuracy. The Sanskrit term Maya describes apparent reality as a dynamic interplay of consciousness and probability waves, where solid matter dissolves upon examination into patterns of information and potential rather than discrete particles with definite properties. This understanding predates by millennia Werner Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and Niels Bohr's complementarity theorem, yet captures their essential insights with poetic precision. The Buddhist philosopher Nagarjuna, working in the 2nd century CE, articulated a theory of dependent origination that mirrors quantum field theory's description of reality as consisting entirely of relationships and interactions rather than independent entities. His logical analysis demonstrated that no phenomenon possesses inherent existence apart from its connections within the jade-shadowed temples of the classical Maya, where priest astronomers tracked celestial cycles with precision that would not be equaled in Europe for another millennium. There flourished a mathematical sophistication that encoded insights into the nature of time, space, and consciousness that anticipate the most advanced theories of contemporary cosmology. The Maya understanding of zero as both absence and infinite potential their manipulation of vigesimal calculations that span millions of years, and their conception of time as a multidimensional matrix where past and future interpenetrate present. Moments suggest knowledge of reality's holographic structure that modern physics is only beginning to comprehend. The Maya Zero, independently conceived centuries before its appearance in Old World mathematics, represents far more than a mere placeholder for numerical calculations. Maya codices describe zero as the shell of becoming, a generative void from which all mathematical relationships emerge and into which they ultimately return. This conceptualization parallels quantum field theory's description of the vacuum state as pregnant with virtual particles and energy fluctuations that give rise to all observable phenomena. The Maya recognized mathematical emptiness as the source of infinite creative potential, an insight that anticipates cosmological theories of universe generation from quantum vacuum fluctuations. Their vigesimal counting system, based on multiples of 20 rather than the decimal system familiar to contemporary mathematics, enabled calculations of temporal cycles spanning millions of years with remarkable precision. The long count calendar tracks time from a mythical creation date equivalent to August 11th, 3114 BCE, through cycles that culminate in periods of over 63 million years. These calculations demonstrate mathematical capabilities that exceed practical astronomical needs, suggesting theoretical interests that transcended immediate calendrical applications. The precision of Maya astronomical observations reveals understanding of celestial mechanics that anticipated discoveries of modern astrophysics. Their calculations of Venus's synodic period achieved accuracy within hours across centuries of observation, while their predictions of solar and lunar eclipses demonstrate knowledge of gravitational dynamics that European astronomers would not attain until the scientific revolution. Most remarkably, Maya texts describe astronomical cycles that can only be verified through telescopic observation or mathematical extrapolation, including the 26,000-year precession of the equinoxes and galactic alignments that occur across geological timescales. The mathematical structure underlying Maya calendrics reveals fractal properties where smaller temporal cycles replicate the patterns of larger ones in recursive relationships that extend across multiple scales of time. The 260-day sacred calendar interlocks with the 365-day solar year to create a 52-year calendar round, which itself participates in longer cycles that culminate in the 5,125-year great cycle of the long count. This nested hierarchy of temporal patterns resembles the fractal geometries that modern physics uses to describe complex systems across scales from quantum to cosmic. Maya mathematical concepts suggest understanding of dimensional relationships that parallel modern theories of higher dimensional spacetime. Their geometric principles involve calculations in what modern mathematics would recognize as non-Euclidean spaces, where parallel lines can intersect and angles can sum to more or less than 180 degrees. These mathematical innovations appear in architectural applications, where Maya builders created structures that embody complex geometric relationships previously thought to require formal mathematical training that developed much later in human history. The psychological dimensions of Maya mathematical practice reveal integration of numerical calculation with consciousness-altering techniques that enable direct perception of temporal patterns, invisible to ordinary awareness. Maya priest mathematicians underwent intensive training that combined astronomical observation, mathematical calculation, and visionary practices using psychoactive plants and meditation techniques. This synthesis of analytical and intuitive methodologies apparently enabled insights into time structure that transcended purely intellectual understanding. Contemporary Research in chronobiology and consciousness studies has confirmed that human awareness operates according to multiple temporal rhythms that interact in complex patterns resembling Maya calendrical mathematics. Circadian cycles, ultradian rhythms, and longer biological patterns create temporal matrices within which consciousness functions according to principles that the Maya encoded in their sophisticated calendrical systems. Their mathematical models may represent empirical maps of consciousness itself as it unfolds through time. The holographic principle in modern physics proposes that all information contained within a volume of space can be encoded on its two-dimensional boundary, suggesting that reality possesses fractal properties, where each part contains information about the whole. Maya mathematics exhibits similar holographic characteristics, where individual calendar cycles contain implicit information about all other cycles through proportional relationships that enable reconstruction of the entire temporal matrix from any of its components. The end of the 13th Bakhtin in December 2012, which concluded a 5,125-year cycle of the Maya long count, generated widespread speculation about apocalyptic endings or transformative beginnings. However, Maya texts describe this transition as part of natural cyclical processes rather than linear historical termination. Their mathematical framework understands time as spiraling through recurring patterns that enable consciousness to access information and experiences from other temporal cycles through resonance relationships, encoded in numerical proportions. The practical applications of Maya mathematical insights extend beyond archaeological interest to encompass contemporary research in consciousness, cosmology, and quantum physics. Their integration of subjective temporal experience with objective astronomical cycles suggests methodologies for consciousness research that combine scientific observation with contemplative exploration. The synthesis of mathematical precision with visionary insight that characterize Maya intellectual culture provides models for interdisciplinary research that transcends the limitations of purely materialistic or purely subjective approaches to understanding reality's fundamental structures. In the mathematics of time, consciousness encounters its own reflection in the liminal spaces where ordinary consciousness dissolves, and the architecture of reality reveals its malleable foundations. Shamanic practitioners across cultures and centuries have mapped territories of experience that challenge every assumption about the nature of existence, identity, and the boundaries between self and cosmos. These journeys into non-ordinary reality, facilitated by plant medicine's rhythmic techniques and disciplined cultivation of altered awareness, consistently reveal dimensional structures that parallel theoretical physics speculations about parallel universes, quantum superposition, and the observer effect that renders reality participatory rather than fixed. The phenomenology of shamanic experience demonstrates remarkable consistency across cultures that had no historical contact with each other. From the ayahuasceros of the Amazon to the bone-throwing sangomas of southern Africa, from the drum-journeying shamans of Siberia to the vision-questing medicine people of North America, practitioners describe accessing realms of experience characterized by fluid identity, non-linear temporality, and information acquisition through mechanisms that transcend ordinary sensory processing. These convergent descriptions suggest either universal neurological phenomena or genuine access to dimensional realities that exist independently of cultural conditioning. The plant medicines that facilitate shamanic journeying, ayahuasca, psilocybin, mushrooms, peyote, iboga, and dozens of other psychoactive compounds, appear to function as biological technologies for consciousness expansion that enable perception of reality's quantum nature. Research in neuropharmacology has revealed that these substances primarily affect serotonin receptor systems that regulate perception, mood, and the sense of self-boundary. The resulting alterations in brain chemistry create windows into states of awareness where the normal filtering mechanisms of consciousness become permeable, allowing perception of information patterns that are typically filtered out of ordinary experience. The descriptions that emerge from these altered states consistently report encounters with autonomous entities, beings that possess apparent intelligence, intentionality, and knowledge that exceeds the experiencer's ordinary understanding. These entity encounters, documented across cultures and throughout history, present profound challenges to materialistic worldviews that reduce consciousness to brain activity. The entities often communicate information that proves accurate when verified through subsequent research, demonstrate knowledge of the experiencer's personal history that they could not have accessed through normal means, and provide guidance that proves beneficial when implemented in ordinary reality. Contemporary research in quantum consciousness has proposed theoretical frameworks that could account for shamanic perceptions of parallel realities and dimensional travel. The many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics suggests that all possible quantum states exist simultaneously in parallel universes, normally isolated from each other by decoherence effects that maintain the appearance of a single, consistent reality. If consciousness possesses quantum properties, as some theories propose, then altered states might enable access to information from parallel dimensional branches where different possibilities have manifested. The geometric patterns and symbolic imagery that characterize shamanic visions display mathematical properties that resemble higher dimensional geometric structures described in theoretical physics. The complex mandalic patterns, impossible architectures, and morphing geometric forms reported during visionary experiences often conform to topological principles that govern hyperdimensional spaces, where ordinary three-dimensional logic breaks down. These visual phenomena suggest that consciousness, when freed from its normal constraints, can perceive spatial relationships that transcend the limitations of embodied three-dimensional experience. The healing applications of shamanic practice demonstrate effects that challenge conventional medical understanding of disease, cure, and the relationship between consciousness and physical health. Shamanic healing often involves journeying into non-ordinary reality to retrieve soul parts, extract spiritual intrusions, or negotiate with disease entities that appear to possess autonomous existence. When these interventions produce documented improvements in physical symptoms, they suggest that reality possesses informational dimensions where symbolic action can influence material conditions through mechanisms that transcend ordinary causation. The shamanic understanding of time differs radically from the linear progression that characterizes ordinary consciousness. In visionary states, past, present, and future often appear simultaneously accessible, with practitioners reporting the ability to visit childhood memories, explore probable futures, and access information from ancestral or evolutionary timelines. These temporal anomalies align with physics recognition that time is relative and potentially navigable under conditions that involve altered relationships between consciousness and space-time geometry. The training methodologies developed by shamanic traditions involve systematic cultivation of non-ordinary awareness through techniques that combine sensory manipulation, rhythmic stimulation, physical ordeal, and consciousness-altering substances. These practices function as technologies for accessing altered states that enable perception of dimensional realities normally hidden from ordinary awareness. The precision with which traditional shamans navigate these altered states suggests sophisticated understanding of consciousness as a dynamic system that can be deliberately modified to access different levels of reality. The integration of shamanic experience with ordinary consciousness requires development of cognitive flexibility that enables practitioners to function effectively in multiple dimensional frameworks simultaneously. This integration process, often described as walking between worlds, involves maintaining access to visionary insights while remaining grounded in practical reality. The psychological skills required for this integration parallel the cognitive demands that quantum physicists face when working with mathematical formalism that describes realities that contradict everyday experience. Modern neuroscience has begun to identify the brain mechanisms involved in shamanic in the liminal spaces where ordinary consciousness dissolves, and the architecture of reality reveals its malleable foundations. Shamanic practitioners across cultures and centuries have mapped territories of experience that challenge every assumption about the nature of existence, identity, and the boundaries between self and cosmos. These journeys into non-ordinary reality, facilitated by plant medicine's rhythmic techniques and disciplined cultivation of altered awareness, consistently reveal dimensional structures that parallel theoretical physics speculations about within the quantum foam that underlies space-time itself, where information and energy dance in patterns too subtle for ordinary perception, yet fundamental to reality's deepest structures. Ancient wisdom traditions have long described vast repositories of knowledge that transcend the boundaries of individual minds and historical periods. The Akashic records, as these informational fields are known in Sanskrit terminology, represent cosmic libraries where every thought, emotion, and experience throughout the universe's history remains eternally accessible to consciousness that achieves appropriate states of receptivity and refinement. The concept of universal memory storage finds expression across multiple spiritual traditions, suggesting either widespread cultural transmission or independent recognition of genuine phenomena that operate beyond the reach of conventional science. Hindu philosophy describes the Akasha as the subtle element from which all other elements emerge, a primordial field of consciousness information that serves as both the source and repository of all manifestation. Buddhist teachings speak of the Alaya Vijnana, or storehouse consciousness, which contains the karmic seeds of all past actions and their inevitable consequences, extending across lifetimes and cosmic cycles. Contemporary research in quantum field theory provides theoretical frameworks that could potentially support the existence of universal information storage systems. The holographic principle in physics demonstrates that all information contained within a volume of space can be encoded on its two-dimensional boundary, suggesting that reality possesses informational properties that transcend apparent spatial limitations. If consciousness participates in quantum processes, as some theories propose, then individual minds might access information fields that exist independently of biological neural networks. The phenomenology of Akashic access, as described by mystics and psychics across cultures, involves entering states of expanded awareness where individual identity becomes permeable to information from sources that transcend personal memory and learning. Practitioners report accessing detailed knowledge about historical events they never studied, understanding complex scientific principles without formal education, and receiving information about future possibilities that subsequently manifest with remarkable accuracy. These experiences suggest either extraordinary intuitive capabilities or genuine access to informational dimensions that exist beyond individual consciousness. Edgar Cayce, the renowned American psychic of the early 20th century, demonstrated apparent ability to access medical and historical information that exceeded his formal education and proved accurate when verified through independent research. While in trance states, Cayce provided detailed medical diagnoses for individuals he had never met, recommended treatments using substances and techniques unknown to him in waking consciousness, and described historical events and personalities with precision that astonished scholars. His work suggests that consciousness, under appropriate conditions, can access information reservoirs that exist independently of individual neural storage. The theoretical mechanisms by which consciousness might access universal information fields remain speculative, but find support in emerging understanding of quantum biological processes. Recent research has revealed that biological systems utilize quantum coherence effects in photosynthesis, avian navigation, and possibly neural processing. If consciousness involves quantum phenomena, then the non-local correlations that characterize quantum entanglement could theoretically enable minds to access information from quantum fields that extend throughout the universe. The collective unconscious described by Carl Jung provides psychological frameworks for understanding shared information pools that transcend individual experience. Jung's research into archetypal symbols, synchronicity, and the collective dimensions of human psychology reveal patterns that suggest underlying informational structures shared across cultures and historical periods. These patterns manifest in mythology, dreams, and artistic expression with consistency that implies access to common sources of symbolic knowledge that exist beyond individual learning and cultural transmission. Indigenous shamanic traditions worldwide describe techniques for accessing ancestral knowledge, tribal memories, and information about distant events through visionary practices that involve altered states of consciousness. These traditions maintain that properly trained practitioners can journey into spiritual dimensions where the accumulated wisdom of their people remains available for guidance and healing. The consistency of shamanic reports across cultures suggests either universal neurological phenomena or genuine access to informational fields that preserve collective memory across generations. Contemporary research in morphic fields and species memory provides scientific models for understanding how information might be shared across populations without direct communication. Rupert Sheldrake's hypothesis of morphic resonance proposes that learned behaviors and knowledge patterns become easier for subsequent individuals to acquire through non-material informational connections that operate across space and time. If such fields exist for biological learning, similar mechanisms might enable consciousness to access information from much larger collective pools. The practical applications of Akashic access extend beyond philosophical speculation to encompass healing, creativity, and problem-solving capabilities that exceed ordinary analytical methods. Artists and inventors throughout history have described receiving complete creative works through inspiration that seem to come from sources beyond their personal knowledge and imagination. Scientific discoveries often involve intuitive leaps that provide solutions to problems that logical analysis could not resolve, suggesting access to informational sources that transcend individual reasoning capabilities. The verification of information obtained through claimed Akashic access presents methodological challenges that require careful distinction between genuine phenomena and psychological confabulation. However, documented cases of historically accurate information obtained through psychic means, medical insights that proved therapeutically effective, and predictive accuracy that exceeds statistical probability suggest that consciousness may indeed possess access to informational dimensions that transcend individual neural storage and processing. Where all memories converge, individual consciousness merges with cosmic awareness. In the infinite recursion of mathematical beauty that underlies the architecture of reality, where the same patterns repeat across scales from quantum fluctuations to galactic structures, ancient civilizations discovered geometric principles that encode the fundamental relationships between consciousness, cosmos, and the creative forces that generate all manifestation. Sacred geometry represents humanity's earliest recognition that the universe operates according to mathematical principles that are not merely abstract concepts but living expressions of cosmic intelligence that can be directly experienced through contemplative practice and artistic creation. The golden ratio, emerging spontaneously from the Fajr sequence that governs organic growth patterns throughout nature, appears in the proportions of ancient temples, medieval cathedrals, and Renaissance masterpieces with consistency that suggests either widespread cultural transmission or independent recognition of aesthetic principles that reflect deeper structural realities. When artists and architects employ golden ratio proportions, they create forms that resonate with consciousness in ways that transcend cultural conditioning, producing experiences of beauty and harmony that appear to be universal rather than learned responses. The mathematical constant phi, approximately 1.618, manifests throughout biological systems in arrangements that optimize space utilization, structural efficiency, and energy distribution. Spiral galaxies, nautilus shells, flower petals, and human facial proportions all conform to golden ratio, relationships that suggest this numerical principle operates as a fundamental organizing force in cosmic evolution. Ancient mathematicians and philosophers recognized phi as a divine proportion that reveals the underlying harmony between mathematical abstraction and physical manifestation. Platonic solids, the 5 regular polyhedra that represent the only possible three-dimensional forms where all faces, edges, and angles are identical, were understood by ancient Greeks as the geometric foundations of elemental reality. Tetrahedron, cube, octahedron, icosahedron, and dodecahedron were associated with fire, earth, air, water, and the cosmic whole respectively, providing geometric models for understanding how consciousness and matter interact through mathematical relationships that govern both physical processes and spiritual development. Contemporary research in crystallography and molecular geometry has confirmed that Platonic solid relationships do indeed govern the structure of matter at fundamental levels. Atomic arrangements, molecular bonds, and crystal lattice conform to the geometric principles that ancient philosophers intuited through contemplative reasoning. The carbon molecule structures that form diamonds, fullerenes, and graphene all exemplify Platonic geometric relationships, suggesting that consciousness and matter share common mathematical foundations. The mandala traditions of Tibetan Buddhism and Hindu Tantra employ complex geometric patterns that map the architecture of consciousness itself, providing visual representations of psychological and spiritual development that enable practitioners to navigate altered states of awareness with precision and safety. These sacred diagrams combine mathematical exactitude with artistic beauty to create consciousness-altering technologies that facilitate direct experience of the geometric principles underlying both individual psychology and cosmic structure. Fractal geometry, discovered by modern mathematics but anticipated in ancient artistic traditions, reveals that natural forms exhibit self-similar patterns that repeat across multiple scales of observation. Mountain ranges, coastlines, cloud formations, and neural networks all display fractal characteristics where smaller components replicate the structural patterns of larger systems. This mathematical principle suggests that consciousness itself may possess fractal properties, where individual awareness participates in larger-scale patterns of cosmic intelligence. The precision with which ancient architects incorporated complex geometric relationships into monumental constructions demonstrates understanding of mathematical principles that would not be formally developed until centuries later. The Great Pyramid of Giza encodes relationships between pi, phi, and various astronomical constants with accuracy that suggests sophisticated understanding of both mathematics and cosmic mechanics. Similar geometric precision appears in Gothic cathedrals, Islamic geometric art, and pre-Columbian astronomical monuments across cultures that had no apparent contact with each other, the psychological effects of exposure to sacred, geometric patterns reveal that human consciousness possesses innate recognition systems that respond to mathematical relationships with emotional and spiritual resonance. Neurological studies have shown that contemplation of geometric mandalas produces measurable alterations in brain activity, including increased coherence between different neural regions and enhanced states of attention and well-being. These effects suggest that geometric contemplation provides direct access to the mathematical structures underlying consciousness itself. The applications of sacred geometry extend beyond artistic and spiritual practices to encompass technological innovations that utilize geometric principles for practical purposes. Architectural designs based on golden ratio proportions create spaces that enhance human well-being and productivity, while engineering applications of fractal geometry enable development of more efficient antennas, computer processors, and energy distribution systems. The ancient recognition of geometry as sacred knowledge reflects practical understanding of mathematical principles that improve both individual consciousness and technological capabilities. The emergence of the same geometric patterns across different scales of natural organization suggests that the universe operates according to self-organizing principles that create order and beauty through mathematical relationships rather than random processes. The prevalence of spiral forms, hexagonal structures, and fractal patterns throughout nature indicates that consciousness and cosmos share common geometric foundations that enable recognition and appreciation of mathematical beauty as a fundamental aspect of existence. Contemporary chaos theory and complexity science have revealed that simple geometric rules can generate patterns of extraordinary complexity and beauty, providing mathematical models for understanding how consciousness emerges from neural activity and how order arises from apparent randomness. These discoveries confirm ancient intuitions that geometry represents the interface between mind and the infinite recursion of mathematical beauty that underlies the architecture of reality, where the same patterns repeat across scales from quantum fluctuations to galactic beyond the mechanistic boundaries that conventional science has drawn around memory, learning, and inheritance. There pulse invisible fields of information that connect all living systems across time and space in networks of shared knowledge that transcend individual neural storage and genetic programming. The phenomenon of morphic resonance suggests that when any biological system develops new patterns of organization or behavior, these innovations become accessible to subsequent similar systems through non-material information transfer that operates according to principles that quantum physics has begun to illuminate, but biology has yet to fully acknowledge. The experimental evidence for morphic resonance emerges from observations that skills and knowledge appear to transfer between populations that have no direct contact with each other. Laboratory rats learning to navigate specific mazes in London show improved performance when subsequent generations of genetically similar rats encounter the same challenges in laboratories in New York, even when the later experiments occur under identical conditions with no communication between research teams. These effects suggest that learned behaviors create informational fields that facilitate similar learning in other individuals of the same species. The crystallization experiments conducted by chemists worldwide provide perhaps the most compelling evidence for morphic field effects in non-biological systems. When new chemical compounds are synthesized for the first time, they often prove difficult to crystallize, sometimes requiring months or years of experimentation to achieve stable crystal formation. However, once a compound has been successfully crystallized anywhere in the world, subsequent attempts at crystallization become easier, even when conducted in laboratories that had no contact with the original successful research. The crystal structures appear to remember their optimal formation patterns and communicate this information across space to influence later crystallization attempts. The theoretical mechanisms underlying morphic resonance involve quantum field effects that enable information storage and retrieval through non-local correlations between similar systems. If biological systems utilize quantum coherence effects in their fundamental operations, as recent research in quantum biology suggests, then the quantum entanglement that enables instantaneous correlation between distant particles could theoretically facilitate information sharing between living systems that possess similar quantum signatures. Consciousness itself may participate in these quantum information networks, enabling individual minds to access knowledge accumulated by the collective field of species memory. The implications of morphic resonance extend far beyond laboratory curiosities to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of evolution, learning, and consciousness development. If species can accumulate and share knowledge through morphic fields, then biological evolution may involve informational inheritance that supplements genetic programming with learned adaptations that become available to future generations without requiring DNA modification. This informational evolution could accelerate adaptive responses to environmental challenges while preserving beneficial innovations that enhance survival and reproduction. Human cultural evolution exhibits patterns that suggest morphic field operations on scales that encompass entire civilizations. The simultaneous emergence of similar technologies, artistic styles, and philosophical concepts across cultures that had no known contact with each other implies information transfer through mechanisms that transcend normal communication channels. The Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and the scientific revolution involved innovations that appeared synchronously across Europe in ways that suggest participation in collective fields of human knowledge and creativity. Indigenous traditions worldwide describe ancestral knowledge fields that preserve the accumulated wisdom of tribal cultures across generations. Shamanic practices involve techniques for accessing these informational repositories through altered states of consciousness that enable individual practitioners to receive guidance, healing knowledge, and practical information from ancestral spirits. Modern interpretation of these phenomena suggests that traditional cultures may have developed systematic methods for accessing morphic fields that contain the collective memory and knowledge of their people. The acceleration of human technological and scientific development during the past century may reflect increasing connectivity between individual minds through morphic field networks, amplified by global communication technologies. As human consciousness becomes more interconnected through digital networks, the morphic resonance effects that facilitate knowledge sharing between minds may intensify, creating positive feedback loops that accelerate collective learning and innovation. The exponential growth in scientific knowledge and technological capability could represent the emergence of a planetary mind that operates through morphic field mechanisms. Contemporary research in consciousness studies has begun to investigate the possibility that individual awareness participates in larger fields of information and experience that extend beyond individual brains. Studies of distant mental influence, telepathic communication, and collective consciousness effects suggest that minds can share information through channels that operate independently of sensory communication and electronic transmission. These findings align with morphic resonance theory's prediction that consciousness can access informational fields that exist beyond individual neural networks. The practical applications of morphic resonance include educational methodologies that accelerate learning by connecting students with knowledge fields created by previous learners. If skills and understanding become easier to acquire after others have mastered them, then educational systems could be designed to take advantage of morphic field effects that enhance learning efficiency. Similarly, therapeutic applications could involve accessing healing knowledge that has been accumulated through morphic fields by practitioners who have successfully treated similar conditions. The verification of morphic resonance requires experimental approaches that can detect subtle informational correlations between separated systems, while controlling for conventional mechanisms of communication and influence. Such research demands methodological innovations that account for the observer effects that quantum mechanics predicts will influence any investigation of consciousness-related phenomena. Where memory transcends individual minds, identity dissolves into larger patterns. At the quantum heart of reality, where consciousness and cosmos intersect in the fundamental act of observation that transforms infinite potential into definite experience, ancient spiritual traditions recognize principles that modern physics has rediscovered through mathematical formalism and technological experimentation. The observer effect, which demonstrates that the act of measurement influences the properties of quantum systems, finds profound parallel in contemplative practices that understand awareness itself as the creative force through which undifferentiated consciousness manifests as the structured experiences that constitute apparent reality. The Vedantic understanding of consciousness as the ground of being from which all phenomena emerge anticipates quantum mechanics' recognition that observation plays a fundamental role in determining physical properties. The Sanskrit concept of sakshi, or witness consciousness, describes pure awareness that remains unchanged while observing the continuous transformation of mental and physical phenomena. This witness consciousness corresponds remarkably to the observer in quantum mechanics, whose act of measurement causes wave function collapse, selecting specific outcomes from the field of quantum possibilities. Buddhist meditation practices systematically explore the relationship between awareness and experience through techniques that reveal how the quality and focus of attention influences the phenomena that arise in consciousness. Advanced practitioners report that intensive observation of mental processes leads to recognition that thoughts, emotions, and perceptions possess no inherent existence independent of the awareness that cognizes them. This experiential insight parallels quantum mechanics, demonstration that particles do not possess definite properties until observed, existing instead as probability distributions that collapse into specific states only through interaction with measurement apparatus. The Zen tradition's emphasis on just sitting meditation creates experimental conditions where practitioners can directly observe how consciousness shapes experience through the simple act of paying attention without attempting to modify or analyze what arises. This non-interventionist observation often reveals that the boundary between observer and observed dissolves under careful investigation, leading to recognition of consciousness as the fundamental reality from which both subject and object emerge. Such insights anticipate interpretations of quantum mechanics that grant consciousness a primary role in the collapse of quantum superpositions. Advaita Vedanta's investigation of the witness demonstrates through logical analysis and direct experience that pure awareness cannot be objectified or reduced to brain states because it provides the conscious ground within which all objects, including brains, appear. This philosophical position aligns with quantum consciousness theories that propose awareness as fundamental to reality rather than emergent from material processes. If consciousness participates in quantum processes, then the observer effect extends beyond laboratory experiments to encompass the continuous creation of experiential reality. Through conscious observation, the practical techniques developed by contemplative traditions for refining attention and awareness provide methodologies that can inform scientific investigation of consciousness-matter interactions. Shamanic vision quests, yogic concentration practices, and mystical contemplation all involve systematic cultivation of specific types of awareness that practitioners claim can influence physical processes through focused intention and observation. These traditional technologies of consciousness offer experimental approaches that could bridge the gap between subjective experience and objective measurement. Contemporary research in psychoneuroimmunology has documented measurable effects of consciousness states on biological processes, including immune function, gene expression, and neural plasticity. These findings suggest that the observer effect operates not only in quantum systems, but also in biological contexts where conscious states influence physiological outcomes through mechanisms that conventional medicine is only beginning to understand. The placebo effect, meditation-induced healing, and intention-based therapeutic interventions all demonstrate consciousness-matter interactions that parallel quantum observer effects. The precision with which ancient traditions mapped the effects of different types of awareness on experiential content suggests empirical investigation of consciousness that rivals modern scientific methodology in its systematic rigor. The classification of mental states in Buddhist Abhema psychology, the analysis of consciousness levels in Kashmir Shaivism, and the mapping of awareness types in Advaita Vedanta all represent systematic investigation of how consciousness creates and modifies experience through the focusing of attention. Recent experiments in quantum biology have revealed that biological systems utilize quantum coherence effects in photosynthesis, avian navigation, and possibly neural processing. If consciousness involves quantum phenomena, then the observer effect demonstrated in physics laboratories could operate continuously in biological systems, where conscious observation influences quantum processes that affect physical outcomes. This biological observer effect could provide mechanisms through which meditation, intention, and awareness practices produce measurable changes in health, performance, and environmental conditions. The applications of observer effect principles extend beyond personal spiritual practice to encompass collective phenomena, where group consciousness appears to influence large-scale physical systems. Research into mass meditation effects, crowd psychology, and social field phenomena suggests that collective awareness can produce measurable changes in crime rates, accident frequencies, and even random number generator outputs. These findings imply that consciousness operates not only individually, but also collectively to influence the physical world through observer effect mechanisms. The integration of ancient wisdom about consciousness-reality interactions with modern quantum physics could enable development of technologies that utilize consciousness as an active component in information processing, healing systems, and environmental management. If awareness can influence quantum processes through observer effects, then properly trained consciousness could serve as a biological quantum computer capable of processing information and influencing material systems in ways that transcend CONVENT-IONAL technological capabilities. In the act of observation, the universe contemplates itself through countless eyes. Within the vast spirals of cosmic time, where galaxies wheel through space in patterns that repeat across eons, yet never identically reproduce, ancient wisdom traditions recognize temporal structures that transcend the linear progression of cause and effect that dominates contemporary historical consciousness. The concept of cyclical time, encoded in Hindu cosmology, Maya astronomy, and indigenous ceremonial calendars, suggests that the universe operates according to recursive principles where past, present, and future participate in eternal patterns that enable consciousness to access information and experience from other temporal cycles through resonance relationships that connect all moments across the infinite spiral of becoming. The Hindu understanding of cosmic cycles describes reality as pulsating through vast periods of manifestation and dissolution that dwarf human historical consciousness while providing meaningful frameworks for individual spiritual development. The concept of kalpas, cosmic days lasting 4.32 billion Years corresponds remarkably with modern cosmological estimates of universe age and evolutionary timescales. These ancient calculations suggest knowledge of cosmic temporality that anticipates scientific discoveries about stellar formation, galactic evolution, and the ultimate fate of the universe through cycles of expansion and contraction. The precision with which Maya astronomers calculated celestial cycles spanning millions of years demonstrates mathematical capabilities that enabled them to map temporal patterns extending far beyond practical calendrical needs. Their long count system tracks time through nested cycles that culminate in periods exceeding 63 million years, while their Venus tables predict planetary positions with accuracy that modern astronomy confirms across centuries of observation. This mathematical sophistication suggests understanding of time as a multidimensional matrix where different cyclical patterns intersect to create complex temporal geometries. Contemporary research in chronobiology has revealed that biological systems operate according to multiple cyclical rhythms that interact in patterns, resembling the nested temporal hierarchies described in ancient calendrical systems. Circadian cycles, ultradian rhythms, seasonal variations, and longer biological cycles create temporal matrices within which consciousness functions according to principles that mirror cosmic cyclical patterns. The human body appears to be synchronized with astronomical cycles through mechanisms that connect individual biological rhythms with planetary and stellar motions. The psychological implications of cyclical time extend beyond mere intellectual concepts to encompass direct experience of temporal patterns that influence consciousness development and spiritual evolution. Practitioners of traditional meditation systems report accessing memories and experiences that appear to derive from other lifetimes or temporal cycles, suggesting that individual consciousness participates in larger cyclical patterns that enable information transfer across apparent temporal boundaries. These experiences align with cosmological models that understand time as recursive rather than linear. The quantum mechanical principle of eternal recurrence, derived from the finite nature of quantum states within infinite time, predicts that any configuration of matter and energy will eventually repeat across cosmic timescales. This mathematical necessity aligns with ancient teachings about cyclical manifestation while providing scientific frameworks for understanding how consciousness might access information from parallel or recurring temporal cycles. If consciousness possesses quantum properties, then awareness could theoretically resonate with similar states occurring in other cosmic cycles. Indigenous ceremonial traditions worldwide employ temporal technologies that create sacred time through ritual practices that connect participants with cyclical patterns spanning generations, seasons, and cosmic ages. Vision quests, seasonal ceremonies, and ancestor honoring create experiential access to temporal dimensions where individual consciousness expands to encompass tribal memory, natural cycles, and cosmic rhythms. These practices suggest that consciousness can navigate temporal patterns through appropriate ceremonial technologies. The environmental applications of cyclical time understanding include ecological management systems that recognize natural processes as operating according to cyclical principles rather than linear progressions. Traditional agricultural practices often incorporate multi-generational planning that accounts for long-term cyclical patterns in climate, soil fertility, and ecosystem dynamics. This cyclical approach to environmental stewardship provides sustainable frameworks that work with natural temporal rhythms, rather than attempting to impose linear control over ecological processes. The technological implications of cyclical time include information storage and processing systems that utilize recursive patterns for enhanced efficiency and capacity, computer algorithms that employ fractal recursion, artificial intelligence systems that learn through cyclical pattern recognition, and quantum computers that utilize superposition states all reflect principles that ancient temporal cosmologies understood through contemplative investigation. The integration of cyclical temporal principles with digital technologies could enable new forms of information processing that transcend linear computational limitations. The therapeutic applications of cyclical time understanding encompass healing practices that work with natural biological rhythms, seasonal cycles, and longer temporal patterns that influence health and well-being. Traditional medical systems often incorporate timing protocols that align treatments with optimal temporal cycles, recognizing that consciousness and biological systems function most effectively when synchronized with cosmic rhythms. Modern chronotherapy has begun to validate these traditional approaches through research that demonstrates how timing influences therapeutic effectiveness. The ultimate significance of cyclical time lies in its implications for consciousness evolution and the possibility that individual awareness participates in cosmic patterns that enable access to infinite possibilities for growth, learning, and creative expression. If time operates cyclically rather than linearly, then consciousness exists within eternal spirals of becoming where each moment contains potential access to all other moments through resonance relationships that transcend apparent temporal separation. At the edge of time's great wheel, all mysteries converge in eternal now. In the infinite stillness that exists before the first thought arises and after the last concept dissolves, where the boundaries between knower and known vanish into the luminous emptiness that is simultaneously the source and destination of all seeking, there dwells a mystery so profound that it can only be approached through the progressive abandonment of every attempt to grasp, understand, or possess it. This ultimate mystery transcends all the enigmas explored in previous chapters, for it is not a problem to be solved, but the groundless ground from which all problems and solutions emerge, the silence beyond all knowing that reveals itself only when the mind's endless questioning finally exhausts itself and surrenders into the vast unknowing that is its true nature. The deepest spiritual traditions recognize this ultimate mystery as the endpoint toward which all authentic inquiry naturally tends when pursued with sufficient persistence and honesty. The Vedantic tradition describes it as neti, not this, not that, a systematic negation of every possible object of knowledge until only pure awareness remains, aware of its own limitless nature without subject or object to divide the seamless wholeness of being. This is not mere philosophical speculation, but the direct recognition that consciousness itself is the mystery it has been seeking to understand. Like an eye trying to see itself or a flame attempting to illuminate its own luminosity, the quantum physics that has illuminated so many of the mysteries explored throughout this journey ultimately points toward this same recognition of fundamental unknowability. The measurement problem in quantum mechanics reveals that the act of observation is inseparable from what is observed, dissolving the classical distinction between knower and known that underlies all conventional inquiry. The uncertainty principle demonstrates that reality at its foundation resists complete determination, maintaining an essential openness that ensures the mystery can never be fully solved but only more deeply appreciated. The archaeological and historical enigmas that have captured human imagination across millennia, from Göbekli Tepe's impossible antiquity to the vanished libraries of ancient wisdom, serve ultimately as mirrors reflecting the mystery of consciousness itself. Each unsolved riddle points beyond its specific content toward the larger question of how awareness arises from and returns to the unknown source that precedes all manifestation. The lost civilizations, undeciphered scripts, and impossible achievements of antiquity remind us that mystery is not a temporary gap in knowledge, but the very condition within which all knowing occurs. the shamanic journeys into non-ordinary reality, the mystical experiences of timelessness, and the visionary insights that transcend individual consciousness all provide glimpses of this ultimate mystery as lived experience rather than intellectual concept. These altered states revealed that the familiar world of subjects and objects, causes and effects, problems and solutions, represents only one possible mode of consciousness, a useful but ultimately arbitrary organization of the seamless totality that can never be fully captured by any conceptual framework, no matter how sophisticated or complete. The silence beyond all knowing manifests not as emptiness or void, but as pregnant fullness that contains infinite potential without grasping any particular expression as ultimate or final. This silence speaks through the mathematical beauty of golden ratios, the precision of ancient astronomical observations, and the recursive patterns of fractal geometry, yet remains forever beyond the reach of measurement or analysis. It is the intelligence that creates without planning, the awareness that knows without thinking, the love that embraces without choosing. Contemporary neuroscience's discovery, the consciousness, involves the integration of multiple neural networks into coherent patterns of activity, points toward this mystery without being able to explain how subjective experience arises from objective processes. The hard problem of consciousness, how and why there is something it is like to be aware, cannot be solved through further research because it represents the fundamental mystery of existence itself. Consciousness is not produced by brain activity, but is the context within which brains and their activities appear. The practical implications of recognizing this ultimate mystery involve a fundamental reorientation from seeking answers to questions toward abiding in the questionless awareness that is our deepest nature. This shift does not eliminate curiosity or scientific inquiry, but locates them within their proper context as expressions of the mystery, exploring itself rather than means to escape or transcend it. The authentic scientist, like the genuine mystic, ultimately discovers that the deepest questions open into wonder rather than closing into answers. The ecological and social challenges facing contemporary humanity require this recognition of ultimate mystery because solutions that arise from awareness of not knowing possess a flexibility and responsiveness that rigid ideological positions cannot match. When action emerges from silence rather than fear, it naturally aligns with the larger patterns of wholeness that include both human needs and environmental sustainability within their scope of care. The peace that emerges from touching this ultimate mystery does not depend on solving life's problems or achieving any particular state of consciousness. It is the recognition that what we truly are has never been threatened by uncertainty, change, or loss because it is the unchanging awareness within which all change occurs. This is not escapism, but the deepest engagement with reality possible. The willingness to be present with what is without needing to control or understand it completely. In the silence that contains all sounds, the journey completes itself in perfect stillness. And so the spiral path returns to its beginning, not as an ending, but as a doorway into deeper unknowing. Each mystery explored tonight dissolves into larger questions. Each answer reveals infinite horizons of wonder. The ancient stones still whisper their secrets to patient listeners. The stars continue their celestial dance, indifferent to human understanding, yet somehow intimately connected to consciousness itself. Perhaps the deepest mystery is not what we do not know, but why the universe created beings capable of questioning their own existence. Perhaps in the very act of wondering, consciousness touches something eternal, a recognition that the mystery and the one who wonders are somehow one.